We'll just give it a minute for people to join in. Right. All right. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to EnviPol's workshop on climate policy. And the idea behind this workshop series that we are offering to you right now is that typically when we talk about climate change, when we talk about policies related to the global commons, which is, anything related to a common pool of water, clean air, things like that, we are typically talking about a lot of problems. And here, our idea is that we want to start talking about solutions. And our way of starting to talk about solutions is to give you two workshops here. And today I'm going to be speaking to you for about 1.5 hours about game theory and how game theory can be utilized in formulating policies for dealing with the adverse effects of climate change and things like that. The next workshop that you will see today is going to be delivered by Ishan, who's my co-founder and my partner for the organization. And he will be talking about the legal foundations, the legal rationale and thinking that goes behind formulating policies. So I'm going to be talking about more on the policy design aspects of things from a game theory perspective. And Ishan is going to be talking about the legal perspective. And what we hope to do is to give you a tool, give you certain mental tools and patterns of thinking. If somebody makes you sit and says that, okay, we want to create a particular policy to mitigate the adverse effects of climate change, how should we do it? How should we start thinking about it? So rather than at that point of time, you just telling everyone that, okay, we have this problem, we have this issue. Rather than talking about problems, you can also start talking about solutions. Now, just to introduce myself, my name is Arpit Chaturvedi. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for EnviPol, and I am also the co-director of the Global Policy, Diplomacy and Sustainability Fellowship, which is a fellowship program, 3-month long, completely online, where you get to learn from leaders from all across the world, people such as the Vice Chair of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, people who are serving at the United Nations, professors from the top universities in the world. You can count in Stanford, Cornell, Oxford, etc., and people from NATO, CEOs from all across the world. So this is our attempt to create a cohort of highly talented people from all over the world, trained by the best of the world leaders from across the world. And I already see that some of our fellows, I see Tanima here, Titli, and a number of our GPOTS fellows joining us for this lecture again. Although we offer this lecture in the GPOTS fellowship, so I suspect that this is just for a revision of the lecture which has already been delivered during the fellowship. But I welcome you all. I think since most of you are interested in learning about climate change and what policies we can make, and most of you are interested in the certification that we're providing, it'll really help me if at least some of us can turn their videos on. It'll also help us, give you your certificates if we know that who are the people that we are seeing on the screen and if you're the right person who's registered over there. So thank you, and good to see you here again, Pushkar and Yuhina. And yeah, cool. So, and Titli, who's right now traveling somewhere, it seems. Cool. So thanks everyone for joining in, and please feel free to raise your hands, ask questions. This is the kind of workshop which will need some bit of mental jogging because it's game theory. And it doesn't involve a lot of mathematics, but then it does involve you to think a little bit in terms of cost, benefits, numbers, etc., etc. Okay. With that, I'm going to jump right into our content. So first thing for game theory to work is that it rests on these three foundational understandings, or these three foundational assumptions, if you will. The first is the assumption of rationality. Uh, and I also see Sampada over here, who's a GPODS alum. Sampada, hello, good to see you. So the first is the concept of rationality. So when we are talking about game theory, for it to function, you first need to assume that people are rational. Now, I'm sure some of you would tell me that, people are not rational, and, we operate under bounded rationality. We have our biases, etc., etc. All of the things that we have learned from, all of the research in behavioral economics. We've read our nudge, we've read our thinking fast and slow. And you would be right in saying that human beings operate under bounded rationality indeed, and human beings do tend to, do things which may not be in their direct benefits. They tend to be altruistic. They tend to, forego certain advantages that they can have over others. But that's a different thing. That does not make game theory not work. You can relax some of those arguments and game theory will still work. We can talk about that a little. But the first is an assumption of rationality. And let's first try and understand what do we mean by rationality. So can somebody in the audience raise their hands and just tell us a working definition of what rationality really is? What do we understand by being rational? I'll take 2 responses before I jump in with my own. Yes, Gahan, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Yeah. Gahan, why don't you unmute yourself and tell us your definition of rationality?
Yes, sir. Okay. According to me, rationality is something where people come up with practical solutions that can be put into practice rather than being too idealistic.
Okay, so you're saying that if you're pragmatic, if you're practical, then you're rational. If not, then you're probably not so rational. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Athar? I see your hand up, so over to you.
Yes, sir. Sir, a rational person.
You can just call me Arpit, guys. Don't call me sir or anything. Just call me
Arpit. A rational person is someone who is sensible, and he worked on the basis of his or her sensibility.
Okay.
And able to make decision based on the intelligent thinking rather than emotion.
Okay, so sensible, pragmatic, intelligent. Okay. Let me quickly take Abhishek and Siddha, and then I'll jump in with my own definition. So Abhishek, are you there? Or Siddha, how about you take it? Am I audible, guys?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Siddha, over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, so I agree with the person who said the first definition, but just to add a little bit.
Siddha, I can't hear you. Am I audible?
Just to add a little bit to what he said.
No, I can't hear Siddha. Is there anybody else who can hear Siddha, or can you guys hear me?
Sir, you are audible, but Siddha is not
great.
audible.
Great. Siddha, do you want to give it another try? No. Okay, Siddha, we'll bring you in later. Let me jump in with my own definition of rationality, and this is the definition that we typically use when we are dealing with game theory or economics and disciplines like those. And the definition of rationality simply is that I am a person who wants to maximize their benefits and minimize their own losses. So I want to maximize my benefit and minimize my losses. More gains, less losses. That's all that rationality means over here. So if you're a player who's rational, you would always want to maximize your gains. Okay. So that's the working definition of rationality that we will go with today. Okay. Now there's something called the common knowledge of rationality. So rationality should be common knowledge. What does that mean? It means that I know that I am rational. I know that the other player who's playing with me, you, are rational. I know that you know that I am rational. I know that you know that I know that you are rational. That is the common knowledge of rationality. That we are, put in simple terms, we are all rational players playing this game. We are all maximizers, profit maximizers in this game. And we know that the other party is a profit maximizer as well. And we know that the other party knows that we are profit maximizers. We are not irrational. And we know that the other party knows that we know that they themselves are profit maximizers. Okay, so that's the common knowledge of rationality. Okay, you need that in order to make game theory work. And then you have this whole concept of equilibrium, and we'll talk about that. In game theory particularly, we talk about something called the Nash equilibrium. And if you've seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, or if you've read about John Nash, then you'll understand, you have some idea about what the Nash equilibrium is. But there's a lot of confusion about what Nash equilibrium really means. It simply means that set of strategies from which nobody would want to unilaterally deviate. So when you look at things like corruption, right? So if in India, for example, earlier, the law for corruption was that it was, or for bribery in particular, was that it was illegal and punishable by law to offer a bribe and to accept a bribe. Now, what happens is that once somebody has offered the bribe and somebody has accepted the bribe, it is in nobody's interest to unilaterally go and report the other person to the government. If I've given you a bribe, let's say, I have Julio in front of me as a government official. And let's say if I give Julio a bribe, and if I will be punished for giving the bribe and Julio will be punished for taking the bribe, then neither is Julio going to report to the government that this guy gave me a bribe, and neither am I going to report to the government that I gave a bribe to Julio, because both are going to be punished. So our Nash equilibrium is that we both don't report. We both, evade the government over there. It is in none of our favors to individually change our strategy from not report to report. Okay, so we'll talk a lot more about Nash equilibria as we move along. But simply put, Nash equilibria is that set of strategies from which nobody benefits from unilaterally deviating. So unilateral deviation is not beneficial. Okay, that's simply what Nash equilibrium is. Now, today what we're going to be talking about is that why certain policies are implemented effectively, and why there are certain other policies which are, there on paper, which look really good on paper. I'm sure we all know about policies. We all can think of certain policies at the back of our head that, okay, these policies are there. They've been there for many, many years, maybe, but they never get implemented, right? And, especially in developing countries, but I can tell you, in developed countries as well, it is really, really hard for policies to get implemented in the same spirit with which they were drafted. So today we are going to be discussing that why certain policies are easier to implement and why certain policies aren't. Now, let me talk about one easy policy which is to implement, which is which side of the road do you drive on? Okay. Now, typically what you'd see in most countries, people either drive on the left side of the road or people drive on the right side of the road. So if you're in India, you're in the UK, you drive on the left side of the road. If you're in the US, if you're in, probably Switzerland, you drive on the right side of the road. Now, is any side better than the other? No. all that you need to do is, if the role of the government over here is just to declare that in our country, I am declaring that we will all drive on the left side of the road. So the government's role is just limited to signaling and then minimal monitoring. Because if everyone is driving to the left side of the road, it is not in my individual interest to unilaterally move towards driving on the right side of the road. Because if everyone is driving on the left and I start driving on the right, then I'm in for an accident, right? Or if everyone is driving on the right and I'm driving on the left, then I'm in for an accident. So what happens over here is that left becomes a Nash equilibrium, or right becomes a Nash equilibrium, because it is in nobody's unilateral interest to deviate unilaterally from the existing strategy. Okay. If I were to show this to you more formally on my screen, how do you model this game in terms of this payoff matrix? Okay, this payoff matrix is very simple, even if it looks a little complicated to you. And as a humanities student, I studied history in my undergrad. The first time I saw it, I was like, no, game theory is not for me, and I'm just running back. But it's fairly simple if you look at it. So there are two players, and mind you, there can be more than two players in more complicated payoff matrices, but there are two players. Let's say one is the society, or you could just consider it one person, and then one is me. Okay. Now, this player, whoever you put over here on the top, this player plays columns. So this player can either play like this or play like this. So left or right. These could be these are your strategies. Left is one strategy, right is one strategy. Depending on the game, your strategy could change, and you could also have more than one strategies, more than two strategies. So if there's a third strategy, you'll just add another column over here, but we don't have it right now. So we'll just stick to this, that this player at the top has two strategies and they play columns. So they can move to column 1, column 2. And this player also has two strategies, but they play rows. Okay. They play either this way or that way. And over here, this is left and that is right. Okay. So now when you look at this payoff matrix, you also see these numbers. What are these numbers? These are the costs and benefits that they incur on playing a particular strategy. So the numbers on the left side of the comma, or the numbers in blue, are the payoff for this player, for me. And the numbers in red are the payoffs for the other player, which I've modeled as a society right now. Okay. So what does 5 over here mean? That if I am playing left and the society is also playing left, then I will get a payoff of 5, a benefit of 5, and the society will also get a benefit of 5. Okay. So that's the format of our payoff matrix. Okay. Is this clear to everybody? Is there anyone who does not understand the format? Please feel free to raise your hand, interject me, etc., etc. Okay. So now let me show you how left and right are Nash equilibria over here. Left is a Nash equilibria because if I am driving on the left and the society is driving on the left as well, then if I move my strategy from left to right, remember I play rows. So if I move my strategy from left to right, I am going from 5 to -1. I'm crashing into somebody, right? Everyone's driving on the left. I change my strategy. I move to the right. I crash into somebody. So I get a -1 and I crash into somebody. So the society also gets a -1. So is it in my unilateral interest to move from left to right? No. Okay. Similarly, assuming that the society is just one person. Okay. Let's say we are in a society of just 2 people. Is it in the society's interest to move from left to right unilaterally? Or is it, let's say if Karina is the other person who's driving. So it's me and Karina. And if we both are driving on the left, unilaterally, Karina would not want to start driving on the right because, again, we could be in for an accident over there, right? But what we can definitely do is that we can both move towards driving to the right, and that will be, again, another equilibrium. So some societies are fixed or stuck or there in this other equilibrium where they're on, where they're playing both right, and it's not in my interest. Remember, I play rows, so it is not in my interest to move from 5 to -1 to start driving from right to left unilaterally. And similarly, it is not in the society's interest to start, or the other person's interest to start driving from right to left. Because then again, you're in for an accident. So right is also a Nash equilibrium. So you have an example where you have two good Nash equilibria present. Okay. All that the government has to do is to randomly choose that, okay, in our country, we will either follow this left equilibria, or we will follow this right equilibria. Now, such policies where you can easily nudge people towards an equilibria, such policies are comparatively easier to implement. It'll not be hard for the people to calibrate themselves almost automatically to drive on the same side of the road as the others are driving, because it is in their own interest. And such policies where you have a good Nash equilibrium, there are bad Nash equilibria as well that we'll talk about, but such policies where you have good Nash equilibrium, all that the government needs to do is a little nudge, and people just start following, out of their own self-interest, they get fixed into a great Nash equilibrium over there. So you don't need a lot of inspection, monitoring, policing, etc., just to get people to comply to follow this sort of policy over here. All right. So other types of policies, these policies that we talked about, they don't need a lot of enforcement. But there are other types of policies which need a lot more enforcement. And, we are just going to talk about that. And those are the policies which we call the ink on paper policy, which are good on paper, but which never really have any impact on the ground, which are never really implemented on the ground. And most of the time, such policies we see are in the cases of public goods. We talk about clean air and, all of those good things that come with, having a good climate. Those are all public goods. But then just to introduce you to a definition, a working definition of what a public good is, let me just get into some discussion around this whole topic of public goods and why this public good becomes a problem in terms of policy making. So a public good has two features. One is non-rivalry and the other is non-excludability. Okay, let's understand what do we mean. So any good, this phone that I'm using, it is not a public good. Okay, just because a good is provided by the government does not have to be a public good. A public good is a special type of a good which has these two features: non-rivalry, non-excludability. What is, let's talk about non-excludability first. Simple. Non-excludability is things that you pay for it, you get it. You don't pay for it, you still get it. So things such as national defense, right? You pay your taxes, you get your national defense. If you are not a person who earns enough to pay taxes, you still get your, right? Am I audible, guys? Can somebody just point out if you're able to hear me? Okay, Shrishti, thanks. So that's the first feature of a public good. The second feature of public good is non-rivalry. What that really means is that my consumption of that particular good does not eat into your consumption of that particular good. So think about, nice sunshine outside. So if I'm out there, if I'm sunbathing, and if you come and you sit beside me, then you're not eating into my portion of the vitamin D that I'm consuming from the sunlight, right? So my consumption does not reduce your consumption. And that's the feature of non-rivalry that makes up a public good. Okay. So again, think of the military, think of clean air, or think of, a lighting pole, which is there outside of your house that lights up the street in the night. So the sense of security that it'll give me would almost be the same. It doesn't eat into the sense of security that it'll give to anybody else who's walking on the street, right? So it's non-rival as a good. Now, these are the two features. Whenever these two features intersect, that means you have a public good. So here we get a little bit into the weeds where we understand that there are various types of goods. The first type of good is a public good over here. Now, a public good, as I said, street lighting, national defense, both are non-rival, both are non-excludable. Pay for it, you get it. You don't pay for it, you still get it. Okay. So whether you pay for it or not, it doesn't matter. You are going to get that good. And one person's consumption of that good does not reduce another person's consumption of that good. Okay. So that's your public good. Now, there are things such as common resource pools. What are common resource pools? So let's say fish in a pond which is nearby your house. So you don't, the common resource pools, what you see over here, okay, they are non-excludable but rival. What does that mean? That you pay for it, you get it. You don't pay for it, you still get it. But my consumption eats into your consumption. So let's say if you have a certain number of fishes in the pond, now that pond, let's say if it's out there in the open, it's not somebody's private property, it's a public pond, then I don't need to pay for fishing over there in that pond. Anybody can go, you pay for it, you'll still be able to fish into that pond. You don't pay for it, you'll still be able to fish into that pond. But my consumption of the fishes reduces your consumption of the fishes. Okay. Potable water. There's about 3% of the total water in the world is potable that you can actually drink. And potable water has a regenerative capacity. So if just like fishes, if you exploit, more than a particular number of fishes in a pond, they would stop or they would fall below their reproductive regenerative capacity. Similar is the case with water. I'm sure that you remember that whole cycle of water that we learned in our primary or secondary school, where there are water turns into vapor, then it turns into cloud, then it rains again. So there's this regenerative cycle for potable water. And if that potable water falls below that regenerative cycle, then lo and behold, you'll find a city which does not have any potable water at all. And we have those cities. We have those cities in India. We have those cities in the US. We have those cities in Mexico where you have run out of any potable water. So common resource pools are the kind of goods which are, again, non-excludable but rival. Then there is a third type of good, which is a quasi-public good. So quasi-public goods are also called club goods. And these are non-rival but excludable, just the opposite of this type. So non-rival means my consumption does not eat into your consumption. Excludable means you pay for it, you get it. You don't pay for it, you're not going to get it. Okay, just like being in a club. You pay for the club, you get the club. You don't pay for it, you don't get it. But once you're in the club, then my enjoyment of the club's resources does not eat into anybody else's enjoyment to the club's resources. And an example is, cable TV, or, if I put a projector inside a room, or if I buy a cable connection, then, or if I buy a movie ticket, then I pay for it, I get it. I don't pay for it, I don't get it. But once, let's say, I'm inside that movie theater, then my consumption of that movie does not eat into somebody else's consumption of that movie. Unless I'm one of those people who's taking phone calls during the movie and not getting out of the picture hall, or I'm throwing popcorns on the others to spoil their experience. But if I'm not doing that, then my consumption of the movie that I'm seeing on the screen does not reduce yours. But it's excludable, because if I don't pay for the ticket, I won't be able to see it. Okay. So toll roads are another example. You pay for the toll road, you get it. You don't pay for the toll road, you don't get to drive out there. But once you're on the speedway, once you're there on the expressway, then my consumption of that road does not really reduce or eat into your consumption of that road. Okay. And then with the final types of goods are rival and excludable. And these are the types of goods. This is my phone, right? This is the Nike shoes that I'll wear. This is the McDonald's burger that I'll eat. So my consumption reduces your consumption because there are only so many burgers which are available. There are only so many phones which are made. Or otherwise, the price will go up if more and more of us are consuming it. And the other thing is that you pay for it, you get it. You don't pay for it, you don't get it. So it's also excludable. So these are the 4 various types of goods. And what typically happens is that in public goods and in common resource pools, there are 2 types of problems that emerge. One is the free rider problem. And if you have worked in a group assignment, or if you're working in teams, which I'm sure that we all are, you know that one person who's a free rider, you know that one person who wishes that they don't do any of the work and let the others do it. And in terms of public goods, a lot of times people become free riders because, in order to maintain clean air or in order to maintain groundwater levels, let's talk about clean air first. In order to maintain clean air, you should reduce the amount of vehicular emissions that you make. So you should be able to take some hit for the whole of the society and travel, more sustainably, not take flights, travel in public transport, don't use private vehicles, share your cab, etc., etc. So you have to make certain sacrifices. And typically what happens is that it is not in your immediate favor to make those sacrifices. It's easier not to make those sacrifices. The rational human being, if you're purely rational, you would free ride. Because who would not want to work on a project where the rest of the society is expected to put in the effort, but we all reap the benefits? Or at least I reap the benefits and the rest of the society is putting in the efforts. Okay, that happens with public goods and common resource pools. What if you don't get the tuna that you want from the pond, but let me have as much as I can? Now, what happens in such cases is that everybody starts thinking this way. Everybody starts thinking that, okay, let me free ride and let me just take my car. Let me exploit a little bit more tuna. And if each person in the society starts thinking like that, then what you have is that you start running out of the tuna in the pond. You start, seeing an ozone, they have a strategy to either sacrifice and work towards air pollution or not sacrifice and just work in their own, work as per their own convenience. And if everyone's looking for convenience, are rational players. Let me give you, just to be clear with the whole concept of public goods, private goods, etc., etc. I'll give you 2 more examples. And one of the examples that I have is just to understand this whole concept. It is a fictitious story. And the other example that I have is something very real and something very concerning. So the semi-fictitious story, not entirely fictitious, is that, from where I teach at the San Francisco State University, whenever I teach there, it's on Market Street in San Francisco. And you come down from the classroom building, there's an underground metro station, okay, a railway station, where there is a guy who plays beautiful saxophone over there. So he's got his, swang connected to the speakers. He has a hat in front of him. So if you like the music, you can just throw in $1 just to appreciate. And he plays beautiful music every while out of the class. And at that point of time, when you stand over there, that music is a pure public good. Why? Because I pay for it. I choose to throw in that $1 in that hat. And I might choose not to throw in that $1. The person is still playing the music. I can still... the other thing over there is that it is also non-rival. My consumption of that music standing on the metro station does not eat into your consumption of that music. Both of us can enjoy, and my enjoyment does not eat into your enjoyment if we both are standing in that lane. Okay, so that makes it a pure public good. How do I convert it to a private good? I'll tell you that story. But Vinay, over to you. Vinay, do you have a question? You can unmute yourself and ask. All right, so we'll just wait for Vinay to unmute himself, and Vinay, you can interrupt me, but then let me just move forward with the story that we have over here. Now, let's say I am a conniving business person, and I don't want to play to the stereotypes. Not all business persons are conniving, etc., etc. Okay. Now, let's say, for the sake of the story, I am a conniving business person, and I want to make some money off of this guy who's playing the music in the metro station. How do I convert? Let's say my first step is I want to convert this public good to a quasi-public good. How do I do that? I pluck this person outside of that metro station, and I plant this person inside of an arena or inside of a stadium. And I put tickets at the gate that if you want to come in, then if you want to enjoy this person's music, then you'll have to pay. I've made this product excludable. You pay for it, you get it. You don't pay for it, you don't get it. Okay. I've made it excludable, but it's still not rival. What do I mean by that? That if I have paid for it and if I'm inside that stadium, then my enjoyment of the music does not eat into the enjoyment of the music of somebody else who's there in the stadium with me. We both can just enjoy the music over there. The only difference from the metro station is that it's become excludable. Now you don't pay for it, you don't get it. So I start earning some money off of this guy. Now, if I think that I want to earn even greater amount of money out of this guy, and I want to create this club good or a quasi-public good into a private good, then what do I have to do? I've already made it excludable. I just need to make this product rival as well, which means that one person's consumption eats into another person's consumption. So what do I do? I pluck this guy out of that stadium or arena, and I put this guy into a soundproof recording studio. And in that soundproof recording studio, I record this person's music and publish 100 CDs of it. And I put a legal, declaration over there that distribution of these CDs, distribution of these music freely is not allowed. Okay. So you cannot just play that music on a loudspeaker on a street. Okay. So what happens? And I just publish 100 CDs of this, and copying those CDs is not allowed. I have made this rival as well because your purchase and your consumption of that CD now eats into somebody else's ability to purchase, consume, and enjoy that music. Okay. And if there's too much demand of the CD, the price will go up. And since there are only 100, then only the people who are able to pay for it will get it. And only, one person's enjoyment of that music has, and let's assume that, people are just listening to this music on their earphones. It's not publicly played. One person's listening to this music reduces the other's ability to listen to the music. So that's example number one. But let me now tell you how it is playing out in our real life, which means how are we seeing public goods turned into private goods? One great example, a glaring example of that is clean air. And if you are, clean air has been traditionally considered as a pure public good. My breathing of clean air does not eat into your breathing of clean air. And I pay for it, I get it. I don't pay for it, I still get it. Like, I don't really have to pay for it at all. But think about the fact that now if you're living in a developing country, and developing countries have some strategic imperatives, they have some developmental imperatives, and for them to be able to develop, they have to burn coal. Okay, let's say the alternative energies technology is still not super available, it's still not super cheap, and because of 10,000 other reasons, which also happens to be the fact that developing countries have still not, beyond a lot of rhetoric, they have still not taken it upon themselves to shift immediately from non-renewable sources to renewable or clean sources of energy. Okay, so let's say you're in a developing country. Fast forward 10 years down the line, you've burnt a lot of coal. Your air is already super polluted as a result. And you don't have to fast forward it to 10 years if you're living in India, if you're in Delhi, or if you're in some of those industrial towns, you already see that towards the winter, you're literally breathing and inhaling smoke. So what you've done over there is that now if you want to breathe clean air, you're going to live in a developed part of the world. You're probably going to be living in Germany or in Switzerland, where they have already developed, and they can afford to install some of these clean energy technologies. If you can afford to do that, then essentially you are a country which is already developed. And if you're a person who still wants to breathe clean air, and if you're living in a developing country or a country which is just developed as opposed to being a traditionally developed country, then you will have to move to one of these countries which has clean air, and moving to one of these countries is costly. The standards of living and just surviving in some of these countries is way costlier from a purchasing power parity standpoint as compared to living in a developing country. Simple example, with the same salary in India, you'll be able to buy a lot more, and with the same salary in the UK, you'll be able to buy a lot less. So if you're moving to one of these countries, then in a way, you're paying a higher amount of money to sustain your lifestyle in those countries and to breathe clean air. So if you want to breathe clean air, you'll have to spend a lot more and relocate to some of these developed countries. What does that really mean? Is that clean air has suddenly become an excludable good. It is still not rival. It has at least become a quasi-public good, because once you're there in Germany, Switzerland, or any of these places, you pay for clean air, you get it. You don't pay your taxes, you still get your clean air, right? So you've converted clean air from a public good, which was available to the whole of the world, to a quasi-public good, which is only available to a club. You pay for it, you get it. Okay. Now, funnily enough, you'll see, and you can do a Google search around it. There are, and on Amazon, you find, privatized clean air, which really means that, you see those cylinders, and there's a mask that's going to be on that cylinder. It's going to be a really small mini cylinder where you'd find clean air from Ladakh or clean air from the Alps. And, you can literally just breathe that fresh air from some of these exotic places. Now, if that's funny to you, then, a number of us would already realize that if you are using an air purifier in your house, you've privatized clean air. Okay. If you're using an air purifier, then if you've paid for the air purifier, you get clean air in your house. You don't pay for it, you don't get clean air in your house. And then only the people who have the air purifier, my consumption of clean air does not mean that the others can consume it as well. Okay. Because, it's there limited to a particular room. Now, if these things seem far-fetched to you, you'd not be surprised, or you might be surprised to know that we have already done this to water. I'm sure we know of certain friends. I have visited certain friends in California who just drink bottled water, or what we call mineral water in India. So if you're just surviving on packaged bottled water, then you've converted potable water into a private good, pure private good. And unfortunately, that's happening with most of the things that we value in our nature, whether it is clean air, whether it is water, whether it is biodiversity. All of these things are either public goods or common pool resources, and we are converting them gradually to private goods. And that's a huge problem, because then there are matters of equity, then there are matters of, human rights and all of that come up, that if you don't have the money and if you don't have the power, you will not be able to enjoy some of these public goods. So that's your broad idea about, that's your broad discussion on public goods, private goods. I'll stop at this point, and if you have any questions, I'll just take them, or any thoughts or comments, I'll just take them. Are we all clear about the concept of what is a private good, what is a public good, all of that? All right. Cool. So we move to our next slide. Now, the thing is that public goods can become victim to the prisoner's dilemma. I'm not going to play that video because we are short on time today. So, but let me just tell you about this video. So what's a prisoner's dilemma? Prisoner's dilemma is essentially a situation where people settle in for a less than ideal outcome. So, when, and I'll take you through an example. If you've watched this movie, The Dark Knight, then there's a particular scene where there are two ships or two vessels, one of which has all of the criminals, one of which has all of the corporate types or so-called civilized people. And the Joker says that the moment the clock strikes 12, I want, he's given detonators to each of the parties, each of the ships, and Joker says that either one party detonates the other ship and nothing will happen, you survive if you detonate the other ship, and if nobody detonates each other by midnight, then both of them will be detonated out. Okay, so what's the best strategy if you're there in that ship? If you're a rational player, the best strategy over there is to get into a race of who detonates the other person first, if you're rational. Okay, as you'd see in the movie, that they chose to be altruistic, they chose to be irrational, and they waited until midnight, and after a while they realized that if the other party, if the other ship hasn't detonated us, that means that we should also not detonate them as well, and we will both survive. But the idea over here is that that's just that shows that they were irrational, and probably being irrational, they turned out to be well. And there's no qualms in saying that sometimes rationality leads us to worse outcomes. Now, I am going to explain you the whole concept of prisoner's dilemma, which is really important in terms of understanding how we behave with common pool resources or public goods from this little game of Apple. So I need one person who can be a volunteer to play this game. So is there somebody who can volunteer to just be the other player with me in this game of apples? So Siddha, all right. So Siddha, do you want to come on video if you can, or unmute yourself and just say hi to everybody?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody.
Okay, Siddha, where are you joining us from?
I'm from Delhi, India.
Awesome. So I'm in Delhi as well right now. So you're probably not too far. So Siddha, the game is like this. We are both playing a game wherein there's a classroom, and there are these 5 apples which are kept inside these classrooms. Okay. And these apples are limited, and they signify the amount of resources which are there in the world. Okay. Now, we can do 2 things. We can either, go in and act. We have 2 strategies. One strategy is acting civil and going inside and dividing these 5 apples equally amongst ourselves. 2.5 to Siddha, 2.5 to me. Okay. Another thing that we could do is to not play the civil strategy. So we will call the civil, the nice strategy, as the dove strategy or the cooperate strategy. You see, the dove is, it signifies peace, it signifies cooperation, right? So we'll either, so this strategy of cooperating and dividing it equally, 2.5, 2.5, is the dove strategy. The other strategy that we can play is the hawk strategy, which is the non-cooperation strategy that Siddha and I, we just rush into the room, and it's a fight between who can get the apples first. And let's say the game plays out in a manner that if we are both playing the hawk strategy, we will get into a scuffle and we will destroy one apple in the fight, and we'll just come out with 2-2 each. Okay, if we are fighting, if we are playing the hawk strategy, or if we are playing the non-cooperative aggressive strategy. So let's say what happens over here in this game is Siddha and I, we meet outside of the classroom, and we say that let's just play the dove strategy. Let's be civil. Let's move into the classroom, and we'll just divide this apple half, and these apples into 2.5 each. We'll have a nice knife with which we'll cut the apples. We'll divide one apple, and we'll go our own way with 2.5. Siddha, do you like that sort of an arrangement? Would you agree that we should go in and we should divide it equally rather than getting into a fight?
Yeah, I think that would be better.
Okay, so let's say we decide that strategy, and we are walking into the room, but now what happens? So we have decided to play cooperate. Okay, now what happens is that, let's say Siddha starts having some doubts. Siddha starts thinking that, okay, what if I move into the room and I'm walking in coolly towards the table where the apples are kept, and I'm trying to locate a knife with which I can cut one apple, and then we can leave with 2.5 apples each. But Arpit is a maximizer. Arpit is a rational player. Arpit might just decide that while I am walking slowly into the room, Arpit might pounce upon the apples and run with all 5 of them. Right? Siddha, you think that can happen, right?
Yeah, there is a possibility. But I mean, it's better to believe the person because we had the deal, although it's being gullible at times.
Yeah, and how about you still run a risk that if you believe in me, then you might just end up with 0 apples, and I might just end up with all 5. So that's the cost of belief. And if you are a rational individual, then would you place that trust in me?
No.
Because I'm assuming you're a rational individual, right? Because you would not want to be in a loss. More is better for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Siddha will think that, no, the best strategy for me is to defect, because if Arpit cooperates with me, then I will run with all 5. So best strategy for Siddha is to pounce upon the apples and run away. Because if I am an aggressive person, then I will pounce upon the apples as well, and we'll leave with 2-2 each. Okay, we'll destroy one in the scuffle, and we'll leave with 2-2 each. But if I am cooperative, then I will walk in slowly into the room, and Siddha will be able to leave with all 5 of the apples. Is that right? So Siddha, the more foolproof strategy for you is to defect, right? Because if I am aggressive, then you'll leave with 2 apples. If I'm not aggressive, then you'll leave with 5 apples. Is that right?
Yes.
But also think that I am also thinking exactly in the same manner. If I am there, then I would not want to be in a situation where I am walking into the room very coolly, and I am expecting that Siddha will also be civil, but Siddha pounces upon the apple and run apples while I am just playing the cooperative game. I am the dove and she plays the hawk and she runs away with everything. I would not want to end up with 0. So what is my best strategy? My best strategy is to be the hawk. Because if I am the hawk and if Siddha is the dove, then I leave with 5 apples and Siddha leaves with none. And if I am the hawk and Siddha is also the hawk, then we both leave with 2 apples each. Right? So my best strategy, the most foolproof strategy for me, is also to play the hawk all the time. Does that make sense, Siddha?
So, yeah, it does.
So, talk is cheap, promises are cheap, and, nobody wants to be in a loss. So eventually what we are going to do is that we are both going to defect. And since we are both defecting, we are both going to end up with just 2 apples, wherein we could have ended up with 2.5 each. And if I were to show it on a payoff matrix, it looks something like this, that if we both are defecting, this forms a Nash equilibrium. Let me just show you how cooperate is not a Nash equilibrium first. So the reason why cooperate is not a Nash equilibrium, because it is always in somebody's interest to deviate from the strategy. This is a wobbly, this is an unstable sort of a place to be in. So let's say if you're both in the cooperate scenario, it is always, remember, this person plays like this person plays like this. Okay. So if it is Siddha, then Siddha, and if we are here, let's say, we decide to cooperate, then it is always in Siddha's interest to move from 2.5 to 5. 5 is better than 2.5, so cooperate to defect. Siddha's best, ideal life would be where I cooperate and Siddha defects. Okay, I leave with nothing, she leaves with 5. And similarly, so that means this is not a Nash equilibrium. Similarly, my best strategy would never be to cooperate all the time, because if we both are cooperating, then I always have the incentive to defect and to leave with 5 while Siddha just has 0. Okay, so our strategies will always, if we are rational, get stuck onto defect, and defect is indeed the Nash equilibrium over here. Let's see how. When we are in the defect, let's say we are here. Now, is it in anybody's unilateral interest to deviate? Would Siddha want to move from defect to cooperate? No. Right? She doesn't want to move from 2 to 0. Similarly, do I want to move from defect to cooperate? No, I don't want to move from 2 to 0. So, since it is in neither of our benefit to unilaterally change our strategy, defect becomes a Nash equilibrium. And imagine if we are playing this defect with nature all the time, then in the longer run, wherein you could have these 2.5, in exponents of many, where you could have enough for everybody, you'll always be stuck in a suboptimal outcome, wherein you'll have fewer and fewer resources, and you'll always be playing the defect strategy. So think about it in this way, that if you're living in a town which is running out of groundwater, and everyone typically uses a motor pump to dig out, to extract water from their personal, backyard. If everyone is doing that, then would you want to go to the government and pay for the expensive water that the municipality or whoever might provide you? You would just want to defect and just do your own thing because it's in your private benefit. But if everyone is defecting on things like these, then eventually you'll have fewer and fewer resources available. So that's one thing about prisoner's dilemma. So prisoner's dilemma is literally this dilemma that just through rational actions, the Nash equilibrium or the most rational outcome is a suboptimal one. Now, how do you break out of this Nash equilibrium is a question. Okay, how, if this is how the world works, if we are running out of clean air, if we are running out of clean water because we are acting in our personal interest and not acting in the collective interest, we are all playing defect as a society. What are we going to do about it? So one way of dealing with it, so I'm going to talk about 4 strategies to come out of the Nash equilibrium, and I'm going to cover it quickly. So if you have questions, please raise your hands and I will stop and I will answer your questions right away. So strategy number 1, it's called the carrot and stick strategy. So essentially what strategy number 1 means is that you will literally, if Siddha and I are playing a game, then you would literally place a police person outside of that room. Now, if the police person sees that Siddha and Arpit went into the classroom, and I see Siddha coming out with 5 apples and Arpit coming out with none, that means that Arpit was trying to act cooperative, and Siddha pounced upon those apples and she played the defect strategy over there, and she broke the law. She broke the covenant that they had between each other. Now, what am I going to do as a police person? I'm going to put a penalty of, let's say, 4. So I'll do a -4 on Siddha. I'll take away 4 of the apples, 4 of the 5 apples that Siddha is walking out with. Okay. So now, instead of this 5, Siddha's payoff to defect unilaterally becomes 1. Okay, because if there's a police person standing outside, the police person has taken these 4 apples and given it to the state. Okay. And similarly, if the police person sees me, the law is the same, that if the police person sees me that I'm coming out with 5 apples, they're able to understand that I was the person who played the hawk and Siddha played dove. So put a penalty on Arpit, leave with 4 apples, take 4 apples away from Arpit. So the payoff for defection, for unilateral defection, becomes 1. Now suddenly you see that this cooperate becomes a Nash equilibrium again. How? That I would not want, Siddha would not want to move from 2.5 to 1. I would not want to move from 2.5 to 1 over here. So Siddha doesn't want to move from cooperate to defect. I don't want to move from cooperate to defect, because 2.5 is just better than 1. I'd like to leave with 2.5 apples, not 1 apple. So cooperate suddenly becomes a Nash equilibrium over here. And mind you, did anybody have a question over there? Okay. Mind you that defect is still a Nash equilibrium. Okay. Because if these are my payoffs, and if I'm stuck here, then Siddha doesn't still want to move from defect to cooperate. I still don't want to move from defect to cooperate. This is an equilibrium, but this is also an equilibrium, wherein I don't want to move from 2.5 to 1, and Siddha doesn't want to move from 2.5 to 1. Okay, so we have 2 equilibria over here, and this is still a better situation. This is still a better game for the government, that now the government can at least keep many people, nudge many people through many ways. A is through punishment, but then also by communicating that, okay, this is also an equilibrium which exists. So you will find people coordinating along these lines. You will find people having an option to cooperate. Now, I can also create a situation where there is cooperate is the only equilibrium which is available. How do I do that? If I see Siddha and Arpit, if I'm the policeman, if I see Siddha and Arpit coming out with 2 apples, I understand that both of them played hawk. So if both of them played hawk, both of them have broken the law. So what am I going to do? I'm going to put a penalty of, I'm going to take away both of their apples. So 2 from both of them. And I'm going to also punish them with a whip. I'm not in favor of capital punishment, but let's say, just for the understanding, I'm also going to give them a little beating. So you're on -1. Or they have to, give me those apples and also probably, pay me some more fine. So I've, let's say, converted this 2 to -1. Okay. Similarly, this 2 I've converted to -1. Okay. Now suddenly this is not a Nash equilibrium anymore, because will we both stick to this strategy? No. If we are both defecting, I'd rather cooperate, because 0 is better than -1. Okay. Similarly, this person would cooperate because 0 is better than -1. So this will not be a stable strategy. This still remains a stable strategy because 2.5 better than 1, 2.5 better than 1. So through punishments, and you can similarly change rewards as well, but through manipulating these payoffs via rewards and punishments, you can bring people towards an equilibrium. Okay. And once you've brought people towards an equilibrium, you'll see compliance of laws. So that's one way. That's the old school way of enforcing or of getting compliance. Okay. Another way of getting compliance is by dividing the game into many stages. Ideally, theoretically, if you're speaking, then dividing the game into infinite number of stages, have a never-ending game. Well, let me tell you first that why finite number of stages will not do the trick for you, theoretically. Because let's say if Siddha and I, we are playing this game 4 days in a round. So, every day we come in, we play this game, we go back, we come the second day, we play this game, we go back up till the 4th day. Now, what's happening is that if I am a maximizer, and even if we have been cooperating throughout, even if let's say we decide that we will cooperate, if I am a maximizer, I am a rational person, my best strategy is that on the last day I will defect, because after that I'm never going to see this person, right? So on my last day, I play, or Siddha plays defect, whoever, one of us, let's say I am the person who's defecting. So on the last day, I will defect, I will play, I have been seeing that Siddha has been playing cooperative with me. So on the last day, I will defect, okay? Because I want to leave with more, right? But Siddha also knows that, I'm a rational person. Again, common knowledge of rationality. So Siddha knows that I am a rational person. So even if we decide to cooperate, and even if we do end up cooperating in the initial stages, Arpit is going to defect in the last stage. So what is Siddha going to do? Siddha is going to decide to defect in the second last stage itself. Okay, because this is fixed. Arpit is going to defect in the last stage. So what is my best strategy? That not only will I defect in the last stage so that I don't end up with 0, I end up with 2, 2. So this is where you will end up with in the last stage. I will also not let Arpit, not let the game be drawn. I would defect in the second last stage itself. Okay. Now, and there we see Siddha. Hi. So now if we are planning to defect in the second last stage, if Siddha is planning to do that, I also know she's a rational agent. So I know that if she is going to defect in the last stage, my best strategy is to defect in the second last stage as well. And similarly, my best strategy then also becomes to defect in the third last stage, and Siddha knows that I will defect in the third last stage, so she will defect in the third last stage, and all the way back to the first stage, our strategy will still be defect. That's the best strategy. If we have a finite number of rounds, we can calculate backwards, and our best strategy would be defect again. But if we have infinite number of games, let's say stage 4, 5, 6, it's right up till infinity, then we are in a very interesting game where you can have 2 of the following outcomes. One could be that, let's say, in one stage, I defect. And then for each of the stages after that, the other person is also defecting over and over and over again. So one day I can earn 5, but then for the rest of my life, I will just earn 2. And over a long period of time, that one day where I earned 5 is not going to matter so much. Okay. So in the long run, if we want, a better outcome, then we will both start cooperating. If there is no last stage from which we can do our backward calculations to the first day, then the better strategy is, or the most stable strategy is, that we both keep cooperating up till infinity. And that has indeed happened in real life. Some of the people who've studied history would agree with me that, England and France were the worst of the enemies for most of your medieval history. And comes the industrial age, and then you arrive towards the Second World War. England and France since then have become allies, and since then the two countries have been cooperating with each other, because they have understood that these two entities are always going to exist. We are in an infinite game over here. And when you look at all of the conflicts around the world, whether it is India-Pakistan conflict or Israel-Palestine conflict, there's always a thinking that one day I can annihilate the other party. We are not in an infinite game. We are in a game where we can put an end to the other party someday. But the moment we start realizing that we are in an infinite game from which we cannot calculate backwards, there is greater scope for cooperation. Okay. Now, practically, infinity is a hard thing to explain to people. Just breaking a game into stages can also bring in cooperation. And if I were to give an example of security, and then I'll give you an environmental example, it'll become clear. So let's say, you have this disputed territory and you have this line of control. And on one side, you have one army on this line of control. On another side, you have another army on this line of control. Now, the way that it happens in real life is that a de-escalation takes place in phases. A de-escalation always takes place in a manner wherein each army would decide to withdraw 1 kilometer each, not completely, but just 1 kilometer. Okay. And why is the reason is that if this army is trying to cheat, if their intentions and their hearts are not pure, then after we have withdrawn, they will try to reclaim this space and more. And when they are trying to rush back to the line of control, the original one, and rush beyond it to occupy more territory, we also have the same amount of opportunity to rush back in and to restore the equilibrium, to restore the status quo. Okay. But if in case, so, withdrawing is not so costly because we have just, withdrawn for 1 kilometer. Now, if they haven't rushed back, that means that there is some amount of trust which is already established. We can trust these people that they have withdrawn 1 kilometer and they are not coming back in. Now we can decide to withdraw 3 kilometers each. Okay. Both sides, they withdraw 3 kilometers, and the same logic applies that if they want to come in and occupy more territory, we can quickly rush back in and restore the status quo. Okay. And then you can eventually talk about complete de-escalation. Okay. And that's what happens in terms of, armed races. When you talk about armed races, that is being caught in the defect-effect equilibrium. But de-escalation is this sort of a thing that I just showed you. Now, a very similar approach of, dividing something into various stages and getting the right outcomes also applies in terms of environmental policy. So let's say, you're dealing with a situation where there's a river and there are 3 factories besides the river which are polluting. And these 3 factories, they always, throw in untreated pollutants inside of the river, into the river. And there is a law, and this is actually an example from real life, that there is a law which says that you will not pollute rivers. National Green Tribunal in India has come up with various mandates that none of the factories, none of the tanneries, none of the refineries will pollute rivers, and they will install water treatment, waste treatment, chemical treatment plants and treat all of their waste before it goes into the river. But unfortunately, like, all you need to do is, my hometown is Firozabad near Agra. All you need to do is to take a drive down the Yamuna Expressway from Delhi to Agra, and you'll see that not just in Agra, you'll find a lot of tanneries polluting in the river. You'll also see other environmental rules being flouted, such as, near the Taj Mahal, 100 kilometers in its periphery, I think, you're not allowed to have factories which are running on coal and on other pollutants, but you'll see a lot of brick kilns which are burning coals furiously. And despite all of those mandates by the National Green Tribunal. Why is that happening? Because, or how can we deal with it? you need to break things down into stages. So these 3 factories that you have over here, if you ask them just ink on paper law that you will not pollute the river, what is, let's say, the owner of factory number 1 over here thinking? That if I install this waste treatment, chemical treatment plant, and the others don't install it, then I am in a situation where I have incurred the expense that eats into my profit, that drives my product cost up, and that makes me uncompetitive in the market. And not only am I uncompetitive, if the others haven't invested in this, the river still remains unclean. I am the only person who's treating my waste. The others are not doing that. So the river is more or less, unclean. And I have also been driven out of business. I don't want to do that. So what is my best strategy? I'm not going to invest in this chemical treatment plant. Similarly, factory number 2 is also thinking the same, that what if I invest? I am going to, incur an expense. My product is going to be more expensive. It eats into my profit. I will be driven out of the market. The river still remains dirty. It still remains polluted because the others are not doing it. So just because everyone is thinking that the other person will not do it, so they will not do it themselves. Okay. Now, what if I were to break it down into phases and I were to get somebody to communicate with all 3 of them? I bring in, a civil society or even an inspector from the government, which says that first we are going to check whether you have left some space in your factory for the water treatment plant or for the waste treatment plant. That's stage 1. So stage 1, factory 1 has a waste treatment plant. You put a check. Stage 2, you put a check. Sorry, factory 2, you put a check. Factory 3, you put a check. And then you tell all of the factories that, all 3 of the factories, you publish the report, which is publicly available, that all 3 of the factories have completed phase 1. They have some space where they will install this treatment plant. Now, you ask all 3 factories to put in a minimum investment of, a basic pump or basic pipelines, okay, that you need to put in, that, just basic pipelines. You're not installing the whole waste treatment plant right now, but all 3 factories are just installing the fundamental pipelines that are needed to set up this plant. And the inspector comes in, does a check, and tells all 3 that, okay, stage 2 for all of them is complete. All 3 of the plant owners have their pipelines installed. Now in stage 3, you can tell them that, okay, now this is the final stage. You need to install your pump. You need to install your treatment plant. Now, since I know as factory owner number 1 and as factory number 1, that factory number 2 and factory number 3 have taken certain steps in this direction already, then I would be confident that if I take this step, then we are all going to incur these costs. So nobody has a relative advantage over the other. Okay. And that means that none of us is going to be driven out of the market. Okay. The overall costs of the product might increase, but I will at least not be driven out of the market alone. And since all 3 of us are doing it, then we might even have a clean river. So just by breaking it down into various phases, you have been able to bring about some cooperation over there. Okay. The third strategy is related to this. This is about information sharing. But this third strategy is what typically international organizations or international institutions would do. So the UN or WHO, all of these agencies, they're dealing with this strategy. And just to make it in time, I'm going to just talk about 3 strategies today. The 4th strategy, for that, you'll have to join the fellowship and we'll talk about it in greater detail in the fellowship. But then the 3rd, and I'll tell you what the 4th strategy is, just the name of the 4th strategy, and then we'll stop it over there. The 3rd strategy is the institutional strategy, wherein, let's say you have a common resource pool. Let's say you have fishes in a pond, and they have a replenishment rate ordered in a manner where you will always have to have at least 50 fishes in the pond. The moment you're let's say typically the total fishes are 100. The moment it goes below 50, the fish cannot reproduce at a particular rate to bring it back to 100. So, if you are fishing more than 50 fishes from this pond, then there will not be enough fishes to reproduce, and eventually there'll be fewer and fewer and fewer fishes over time, and one day you'll have no fishes in the pond at all. Okay, so if you are in such a situation, and let's say there are 5 households surrounding this pond, so each household's best strategy would be, and let's say the replenishment cycle is of a week, so the best strategy for each household is, just draw out 10 fishes per week. Okay, so 10, 10, 10, 10, and you get a 50 fishes every week, and don't go any further than that. But now herein comes in the problem of the free rider. Let's say this house, in a stroke of irresponsibility, and maybe this house has some guests over, they say that, okay, let me extract 11 fishes today because I'm either feeling a little more hungry, or I have some guests on me in my house. Let's say if that happens, nobody is watching, right? So why not? I'll eventually find the balance. I'll just hope that nobody else, there's somebody who just extracts less than 10. So just by this one act, you can set this threshold or reproduction limit, reproduction cycle off balance, and you have fished 51 fishes. There is lesser reproduction, and next week you will not see 100 fishes in the pond. You'll probably just see 90. Okay. Now let's say that if everyone is thinking like that, and in 1 week or the other, somebody just fishes a little more than they are supposed to, everyone is fishing 11 fishes, then you will be in a situation where from 90, you'll start having just 80 fishes after a week, to 50 fishes after a week, to one day you would not have any fishes at all. All the fishes in your pond die out, and you have no food and you're starving. Okay. And that's because everyone is thinking nobody's watching. So what do you do? What's the solution to this? You bring in this person who's living in a nearby village and ask this person to set up a plank over here, and this becomes the spot. You create a rule that everyone has to fish only from this plank. You cannot fish from wherever you want. You have to come here and you fish here. Again, think that when we are talking about the UN, when we are talking about multilaterals, we are talking about a rule-based world order. And that's what this means, that you follow some rules and you'll all be fine. These are the rules that will keep you alive. So everyone fishes there, and this person's duty is, this person has a whiteboard over here. So something like this. This is a plank, this is a whiteboard, and this person's duty is that he or she just records the number of fishes that each of the household has extracted. Okay. So this person knows that if this household has extracted 11 fishes in a week, then this person, everybody has that signal, then this person would probably for that particular week just extract 9. Okay. The rest of them keep at 10, 10, so that in total just 50 fishes are extracted. Okay. And if this person is extracting 11 fishes over and over again, then the others can tell him that after 2 weeks that, hey, you've extracted 11 fishes for 2 weeks straight. Now for the next 2 weeks, you have to go to 9 so that I can get 11. So I'm going to enforce this discipline onto you. So this becomes a mutually, self-reinforcing, self-governing, self-disciplining sort of a society. Why? Because there is one person who has bridged the information asymmetry over there. And that's what happens, at the world level, where there is no global police. We say that, the world exists in a state of anarchy. That doesn't mean that the world exists in a state of chaos. That literally means that there is no global police. There's nobody to say that, you will do that. UN cannot enforce things. UN can just make information transparent and available to everybody, and then just allow everybody to mutually adjust to it, and then just allow people to be self-governing and governing each other. So there's no one police, there's just information, and people police each other in a way, or people just coordinate and cooperate based on what the others are doing. So that's our third strategy. The fourth strategy is simply that make cooperation really, really, really lucrative. I will, just give you a brief overview of that. Let's say, we are talking about two people, Ronald and Donald, and let's say, both of them, wherever you see units of energy, see dollars. So let's say both of them, they have to give $1 in taxes, and that pool of $2 in taxes, since it is being employed towards investing in a public good, and public goods have a lot of positive externalities. So if you, let's say, invest towards education, or if you invest towards health, then there are so many other benefits of that. So if you invest in somebody's education, they are also likely to be more healthy, they're also likely to live longer, etc., etc. So you invest in a public goods and you get more than higher returns, more than let's say you get 1.5 times the returns. Okay, so let's say Ronald and Donald, they both cooperate, and they're like, okay, $2 is our common pool, which we will invest towards, education, health, or security, and it'll give us 1.5 times the returns. So the total societal benefits of $2 will become $3 because 1.5 times the returns. And then since it's a public good, then everybody gets the benefit of this. So this $3, let's say, is divided into Ronald and Donald equally, and Ronald gets $1.5 back, Donald gets $1.5 back. So by investing $1, they eventually get $1.5, right? In terms of benefits over here. Now there could be a scenario where just one of them is investing, Donald decides not to cooperate, Ronald is investing $1, that becomes your national budget that is invested in health or education. It's still 1.5 times because it's lucrative. Public goods, investment in public goods gives you disproportionate returns. So both of them still get equally, they still benefit equally from these $1.5. So 0.75 goes to Ronald when Ronald has invested $1. And Donald gets 0.75 as well, but Donald did not invest anything. So Donald is still holding on to that $1 that Donald had. So eventually, Ronald, after investing $1, gets 0.75. Donald gets 1.75. Okay. The other flip side could also be true. Ronald defects. Donald doesn't defect. Okay. So Ronald gets 1.75. Donald gets 0.75. And the other could be that they both defect. They both say that, okay, we are not going to invest in this public good at all. We are both going to hold on to our $1 and we leave the game with our $1, together. So this is how the game looks like. If you look at it, the Nash equilibrium will be defect. Ronald doesn't want to move from 1 to 0.75. Donald doesn't want to move from 1 to 0.75. So this is a Nash equilibrium, defect. Cooperate is not a Nash equilibrium because you want to move from 1.5 to 1.75 and I want to move from 1.5 to 1.75. So defect is the only Nash equilibrium. Now, if the return on investment increases from 1.5 to 2.5, you have a different story. Because in this case, if both are cooperating, they get 2.5 each. So 1 comes to the common pool. So $2 multiplied by $2.5, total is $5, gets split equally to both, 2.5 to each. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is that Ronald cooperates, gives $1, that gets converted into 2.5 into the common pool resource. This gets split up 1.25 to both. But Donald had $1 initially as well that he did not invest. So Donald gets 1 plus 1.25. So Donald is on 2.25, Ronald is on 1. And the flip could also be true that Ronald defects, Donald doesn't defect, Ronald is 2.25, Donald is 1.25. And the other is that both of them, they're like, okay, let's not invest in public goods at all. They're both at 1-1. But now over here, if you look at this sort of a payoff metrics, then you see that this is the Nash equilibrium. Because if you're over here, you wouldn't want to move from 2.5 to 2.25. I wouldn't want to move from 2.5 to 2.25. Cooperation is the Nash equilibrium. The only difference between these two scenarios is, in the first scenario, the return on investment was 1.5. In the second scenario, the return on investment was 2.5. And when you look at it, the results are that the first scenario, you had defect as the Nash equilibrium. The second scenario, you had cooperate as the Nash equilibrium. So by making cooperation really, really lucrative, you have been able to create a scenario where everyone would want to cooperate, and you'll just have more and more of those resources. So that's our 4 strategies. Just concluding, strategy number 1, that's the carrot and stick strategy. Put a policeman outside the room. The second strategy is divided up into many phases, and you'll see cooperation. Strategy number 3 is information asymmetry, bridge through institutions. And strategy number 4 is make cooperation really lucrative. So these are 4 strategies that you can think of when you want to bring about cooperation. So that's my lecture. If anybody has any questions, I'll probably be able to take 2 of them before we move on to the next one. Questions, comments, anything we can...
I think we need to open the chat box. It says the chat is disabled.
Yeah. And what I'll also do is that I'll type my email address in the chat box. If you want to learn more about this, you can. The best way is that we discuss this with a simulation in our fellowship. That's the next class for our fellowship for the fellows who are in. And you can also reach out to me over email. Pushkar, you had a question. Pushkar, go ahead.
Thanks, Arpit. This was a really useful session. And my question is on how exactly would these exercises or simulations be useful when you're actually considering cross-border policy recommendations, such as, if you're considering a problem between India and, let's say a neighboring counterpart, how would you, because there we don't have common understanding and common equations. So you gave the caveat in the beginning, but how could we minimize those aspects and utilize these components?
Absolutely. A lot of confusion takes place when both parties are not sure what games they are in and what are the payoffs for the other party. And to make it worse, nations try to actively hide their own payoffs and hide their own strategies. The problem that emerges over there, and that's the role that institutions play. So if you're talking, about the ease of doing business rankings that the World Bank publishes, the reason for that is that everyone can easily see that, okay, this is what this country is doing to make setting up a business easier over there. So this is the payoff, this is the strategy, this is the whole profile of this country. So the role of the institutions is to make this knowledge transparent. And one great example of this is, India and China during the 1962 war, where, India thought that we are stuck in a Nash equilibrium, that, both of us are just wary and scared of each other. So both of us might just get into a defect strategy. We are playing that game of apples over here. So if we talk to China enough, and if we are able to make them understand that we are in a Nash equilibrium, they might understand that, cooperate is a good strategy. Okay. The problem over there was that China did not think that they are in a prisoner's dilemma Nash equilibrium. China thought that the game is not prisoner's dilemma. The game is, there's one particular type of a game that I haven't talked about. The game is called chicken. So chicken is a game where, bootleggers would play it in the US, where, two cars are coming towards each other at high speed, and whoever swerves, chicken's out. So if I have a reputation never to swerve, if I have a reputation that I would always ram into the other car, then the other car's best strategy is to swerve. Okay, because the other car knows that this person is never going to swerve. So once you develop a reputation for chickening out, then everybody knows that you will chicken out and everybody is going to just ram over you. So China thought that we are in a game of chicken, so chickening out would be a very bad strategy. And China thought that, okay, let's just go all in with the war, while India was thinking that, so both of the countries have different perceptions of the games that they're in. So that is the role of the civil society. That is the role of international organizations, to just have the communication bridges open so that people can understand these are the payoffs, these are the strategies, these are the games they're in. That's it. And once that is done, and that's easier said than done, but once that is done, then you get better outcomes.
Thanks, Arpit. That's quite useful.
All right. So in the interest of time, I have put my email in the chat box. Now we will hand it over to Ishan, who will take you through the philosophical and legal foundations of policies for climate change. Before that, we will show you a short video about this great fellowship that I've been talking about, the Global Policy, Diplomacy and Sustainability Fellowship. And since some of our fellows are here, we can probably invite some of our fellows to just talk about their experiences of the fellowship after the video. So over to Shrishti to show us a little snapshot of what this fellowship has been and what it's all about. So Shrishti, over to you. This is a place where you are not really a student, we are not really teachers, we're all coming together in a community of fellowship, and that's the reason why we call it a fellowship, where we think that everybody makes knowledge or builds knowledge based on the ideas that they already have in their mind.
Problem is greenhouse gas emissions that affect the temperature of the climate. You have to go back to the basics each time you feel you run into an ambiguous situation. And that's where things like critical thinking and problem solving and root cause problem solving comes in. For example, starts with defining first what the problem is rather than getting into solving the problem.
We're seeing the limits of the multilateral system as it was conceived 75 years ago being reached. And you see a big fight going on many levels, including these disarmament affairs. On, let's say, I always say it's basically 3 levels that we see fights going on here in the UN, including on disarmament affairs. The first is on language, the second is on money, and the third one is on positions.
Companies like Microsoft is a good example that have committed even not just to become net zero, but they want to sort of offset their historic emissions as well. So there's an incredibly ambitious target, and that's good. You know, we want that ambition, we want that awareness.
Policy making body on environment at the same level with the General Assembly for all other issues globally. But for environment, it established the United Nations Environment Assembly.
IOI, or impact on investment. So that's essentially what this, your management really should all be about. You're trying to maximize the impact on investment.
The fact that the G7 came together and pledged an additional 1 billion doses of the COVID vaccine next year on top of the 1 billion that's already been promised. This is important. Of course, there's been criticism saying that's not enough. Of course, it's not enough. But still, that's a billion.
You might define it as coordinated and synchronized action that often deliberately targets democratic states and institutions.
Because in international relations and diplomacy, it often is very important, to be heard, to be able to state your case and your position. Whether you get it in the end is a different story, but in order, you have to be transparent, you have to be inclusive, and that was something that Copenhagen was not. As you perhaps know, there were like backdoor negotiations, but Paris was very, very open, very inclusive.
Every year I went to the NASCOM and it was fantastic. You met people who were thinking out of the line, out of the box. It's not a small box, but a huge box. It shows that Egypt has the capacity to develop a global industry that can service the whole world, the whole corporate world.
New technologies are emerging and being developed at the faster pace than ever. So I do think that we are going to need to do a kind of a bigger job than we are doing today in a way to get new kinds of arms control in a broad sense. To work on, to discuss about the role of these.
Science of attribution, of being able to say, has changed so much that now you are able to look at the probability of events happening and the link to climate change, the link to fossil fuels. We're seeing incredible things happening in courts these days.
GPODs has helped us build such a rich network of professionals who are truly global and are actually working at the cutting edge of solving some real policy problems.
The ability of GPODs to actually stimulate us intellectually is what best qualifies and characterizes it. And I feel personally, for me, it has really broadened my horizons.
I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity over the last 3 months to get to know you all and also just have such incredible mentorship and intellectual stimulation. Coming out of grad school, I think I was really lacking that in my life, and to be able to have such dynamic conversations.
I would like to look at a case study of Cambodia in Thailand. In Thailand, in 2018, the government actually set aside a social security program that also provides an health security for the 1/5% of the urban poor, and it is called National Health Equity Program. And in this equity program, it comes with two facets. Number one, it's helped to guarantee the health security of the people of the 1/5% of urban poor and the poorest of the poor in the country, and also help to empower the hospitals and the district hospitals with equipment, with facilities that would aid them in attending to the urban poor.
As I said, Venezuelan migrant women, and they are caught in between a situation where their original healthcare system of their home country is not adequate to meet the needs and expectations of COVID-19. So they historically have been migrants to neighboring countries such as Colombia, but because of the restrictions on equal access to healthcare as well as other universal human rights in Colombia, it becomes a precarious situation for these migrant women who are looking for safe jobs, who are trying to avoid gender-based violence, which unfortunately is very frequently occurring over there, on top of not having that healthcare access, and are actually, in most cases, forced to return home to Venezuela. And during this pandemic, it's not good. And generally,
it was an amazing experience, because I would say I've come from a totally quantitative background, and this program has given my mind some great wings, because I've met mentors from different walks of life and transcending many different avenues of human endeavor. So, in that sense, I would say it's total diversification, and very, very thankful to GPODs and to the fellow mates.
Thank you so much, Shrishti. And our fellowship applications are open now, as I've already mentioned in the chat box. If you want to apply, you need to go to www.gpods.org, gpods.org. Your early application deadline is August 15th. The late application deadline is September 15th. We are looking forward to hosting a number of really accomplished mentors from the UN, from Harvard University, from various advisors to ministers, legislators, and NGO leaders, the ex-head of BCG and folks like that. You can find all of the details on our website. And if you also want to attend workshops like these and other events that we keep organizing throughout the year, you can go to the website and subscribe to our newsletter. So you'll just have to scroll down to the bottom to the contact us form and subscribe. Once you do that, you will be invited to all of the various events. We are planning one event with UN Habitat. We have one event with New York Climate Week. So you can just subscribe over there and we'll get your email address and you'll start receiving updates on all of these events from us. Now I'm just thinking, Ishan, before you start, so Pushkar, whoever, Tina, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
So thank you so much, Arpit and Nishan. And I think awesome is just the word, the kind of experience we're having. And I must tell you both that, the real USP of the fellowship is the structure, because the way you have packed it with the mentor lecture, the interactions with the mentors, the office hours, and, of course, the case study sessions, they are all which really put our minds to jog and think a lot about it. When I joined the fellowship, I was purely from a public health background. But I must compliment you both that after attending the lectures, I have gained a lot of inclination towards environmental health. And I've already, started talking to people, and that this is the kind of structure which should take a shape of multiple fellowships that people are offering across the globe. And we should have a similar structure for theme-based fellowships as well. And I'm so excited to have a separate office hour sessions with both of you and, share some of my experiences where I get to hear from doctors from medical colleges and the people I work with, that if you can put us in touch with Ishan and Arpit so that we can design a similar fellowship structure for, for their teams. And they have a lot of students already interested who they really want to nominate even for GPODs. And I think I enjoy every minute and every lecture, which is full of learning, experimental experiences, the real case stories, and people who come and talk about how they actually translated their knowledge into action gives us a lot of motivation to, follow a similar path. And I just heard one of the fellow mentioning that it gives an exposure to a lot of diversity. So it's actually a platform which gives an opportunity for unity in diversity, because people from such a diverse background from all across the globe are participating in these interaction and lecture sessions. So, and I must tell you, all of you, that the mentors we have, and especially the directors we have, they don't behave like professors. And I personally feel that they are fellow colleagues, they are friends, and they are the best buddies to reach up to anytime and ask a number of questions. They are always available to address if you have any questions. So I would really encourage people to come and join. And Ishan and Arpit, I will be the best advocator, I promise, for motivating people to come and join, more and more people to come and join. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you, Tina.
All right. I think just in the right time.
Yeah, I lost my internet connection in the middle, but I'm trusting that you've said all the nice things.
Yes, but she did not say a couple of nice things about you, but it's a good thing that you weren't here then. I'm joking. All good things. Thank you, Gina. I see that PK's hand is up. PK, do you want to go?
and Gina, if you need.
Go ahead, PK.
Yeah, so the best thing about the fellowship is we do by practice. be it the workshops or be it the mentor sessions, that we learn by practice. So the couple of exercises that we did as a team, so this inculcates the team spirit. Now, when I work with diverse mentors and diverse participants, which even Sheena was mentioning about, you learn from diverse backgrounds as well, because we have a pilot, we have a captain, you have people from all across backgrounds, people working from oil and natural gas industries. One of them is a German tutor, a couple of lawyers in the house. So it makes it a really diverse background to learn from. So I must say that the best thing about the fellowship, apart from this, is how do you ask questions to your mentors during the office hours? So be it getting a job at the UN or be it working for the government in the country. So it truly is a wonderful experience. And I have already recommended this to a couple of my juniors at law school because they want to know more about a diverse experience like this. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you, PK. I don't know, Titli, are you going to say a couple of nice words for us, or should we go ahead with the lecture, whatever you wish?
Sorry, I had a hard time unmuting myself, Ishan, because I didn't raise my hand.
That's
but
fine.
I think
today you mentioned to me over in the draft that you were sharing with me that you have technologically challenged. So everything.
Yes. But I think Sheena and Pushkar completely, shared everything that I would have wanted to say, except that I think in this world of specialization, it's extremely hard to find a course that gives you the opportunity to learn all three things, diplomacy, policy, and sustainability in one go. So everyone should take the opportunity because it gives you a very holistic approach at looking at problems. And just the way it's orchestrated, it's not a teaching student sort of relationship, it's more like a facilitator, participant sort of relationship where all of us are learning from one another. And it's extremely exciting and happy to be here. Ishan, Arpit, y'all are doing a great job. So yeah.
Thank you, Titli. I must confess, guys, for those of you who are already here as GPODS fellows, and for those of you who are planning to join us, we are investing so much of our time, efforts in this fellowship because we're gaining family from all of you. So I say this to every cohort, and I'll say this to those of you who are already a part of it and those of you who will be a part of it in the future. This is safe for posterity, given the fact that this is digitally recorded. But once you're a part of GPODS, you cannot let go of us, even if you wish to. So we'll always be in and around if you ever need anything from us. So that being said, enough of a shameless plug about GPODS. Let's move on to the topic of our discussion. Now, the first session, as you guys have already seen, was about how public policy shapes conservation or could shape conservation when it comes to international cooperation, relations, so on and so forth. I will approach conservation in a very different way. Some of my first, to give you an introduction about myself, I am by qualification an environmental lawyer, and I am the co-director of GPODS Fellowship. I'll also share my email ID separately with you at the end of the session. When I was recently and guys, I have given this session a lot of time. So if you have seen this, please do excuse me and please be patient. There's something new for everyone in every session. But I want to contextualize my talk today. I was speaking with one of the most prominent names in climate finance just day before yesterday. And one of the topics of conversation, and I've known the guy for a long time, one of the topics that came up was sustainability officers, okay, or sustainability professionals in the private sector. And a thing that came up was a lot of these sustainability professionals were hired either from a finance background, so they were interested in climate finance or general finance, or they were hired from human resources background, so they had a very basic HR background. Some of them were hired from sustainability background, obviously. But all of our, and that's the crux of the GPODS Fellowship as well, it is our experiences, it is our academic background, our professional background that shapes our perspective. But shaping our perspective and hitting a brick wall against that perspective are two different things. So no matter where you come from, you can still be a sustainability professional, you can still be a sustainability worker, activist, actor, factor, whichever way you look at yourself. So one of the issues that we covered in my talk with that person was all of these a lot of these sustainability professionals, it's wrong of me to paint them all with the same broad brush, but a lot of these sustainability professionals do not consider what sustainability really is. And outside of triple bottom lines and profit and loss accounts, we do not really consider how this plays into a private sector or public sector's scheme of things. So what I have designed here, some of which I cover quite extensively, some of which I do not give out in public lectures usually. What I have designed here is one, an introduction for you to know what sustainability is, what environment is, so that if anyone ever asks you, so what do you know about environment, you have something to tell them. The second thing is, why is it so difficult, right? We may talk about climate change and we may talk about agriculture, sustainable farming, sustainable energy, so on and so forth. Why the heck is it, and I have to watch my words, it's recorded and we're going live. Why is it such a complex problem? And that is what the intention of the session is. I'm going to leave you, and this is a bit of a disappointment that I'm giving to you already. I'm going to promise to leave you with a bunch of questions and not enough answers. That is specifically done so that you're curious enough to look it up, check out GPODS, reach out to us separately, reach out to all of our fellows who are already fellows, they're extremely accomplished themselves, and have a conversation about this. So that being said, let's start with, as I said, something that I talk about very often in my open lectures in the GPODS Fellowship. But before I do that, something that I do very often again is the more you interact, the better it is. Keep your videos on so that I have some context of where you're speaking from, where you're coming from. This is a safe space. It's an open lecture, I understand, but please do not be hurtful. As long as you're not hurtful, I invite all of you to challenge me, to challenge each other, to argue, and have a rational discussion if you can. There are a few disclaimers. As I mentioned, I am a lawyer, so I will put out a couple of legal disclaimers as well. One is that these are my views, not of any of the organizations that I represent. It's a heavy duty topic that we're dealing with, so bits and pieces. Or there's a cricket joke that I want to crack, but I won't. And we're going to begin assuming that none of you know anything about sustainability. And it's not to, I'm coming from a very humble place here, but we must also be wary of others in the room who want to learn about sustainability, but do not know where to start. So let's also give them hope that it's never too late to start, and this could be your start. And that's the idea behind starting here. I'm going to start with a very, very basic term called the environment. But before I do that, I'm going to show off by telling you that I know a lot about astrophysics, which is my passion, which is what I am an astrophysics nerd. I tell everyone about this. I'm not an expert, so I do not know nearly enough, but I read a lot about astrophysics. In fact, neuroscience and astrophysics are two of my keen interests outside of law and environment. And since I'm talking about astrophysics, who do I cite to begin off the lecture? I cite one of the most famous cosmologists the world has seen, and that is Carl Sagan. And he had this very interesting quote, which will, I hope, help you relate to the topic that we're discussing today. If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, and if someone asks you to make apple pie from scratch, what would you do? You would take an apple, knead the flour, get every ingredient locally sourced if you have to. And that's our definition of what is making an apple pie from scratch. But truly, if you're thinking about a specific subject, then making an apple pie from scratch would mean that you have to grow an apple. But how did you come to growing an apple? You have to first come up with a seed. How do you come up with the seed? You have to first understand the chemical reactions that happen in our world. Why do those chemical reactions happen is going back to the history of our planet. Why did our planet come together? Is going back to the history of our universe. Why did that universe happen? Is going back to the history of Big Bang. So when you ask someone to make an apple pie from scratch, to do justice to that request, you first need to reinvent the universe. So if you want to take a plunge in climate finance, if you want to take a plunge in international diplomacy, public policy in environment, sustainability of any sort, solid waste management, there are so many factions now. Remember, you must first invent the environmental universe, and you do that by learning the very basics of environment. So we can start at ground zero. And the ground zero is obviously asking what is environment, right? How do you define environment? And this is something, I promise you, this is, I am going to connect this to a completely different thing, and you'd be quite either amused or bemused about how I've gone about the session. But either way, I ask you to stay patient for the next hour or so. These are the most prominent words mentioned in legal definitions of the term environment. And we do not have the chat option available. We do not have the unmuting option available. So I'm going to be monologuing the heck out of this. But usually I ask questions. The most prominent words you find when you define environment are human beings, quite obviously. Water forms a part of the legal definition of environment in most jurisdictions. So does air, land, other living creatures, plants, microorganisms, property, and very importantly, their interrelationship. This makes for a very, very interesting reading. Now, on the face of it, when I came across these words and I realized that these were the most common words, I thought to myself that this is quite obvious, and it makes complete sense because water is environment, air is environment, soil is environment, land is environment, living creatures, wildlife, so on and so forth is all environment. But then you start questioning, and that's the basics of studying environment, sustainability, environmental law, policy, however you want to put it. Are you challenging every concept there? And I'll tell you why you should challenge it. But let us first exercise that challenge here. Do we see a commonality amongst all of these words that I've put out in such a fancy way with this fancy photograph? The commonality that I found is water is a requisite for human beings to survive. Air is a requisite for human beings to survive. Land, human beings to survive. Living creatures, human beings survive. Plants, microorganisms. Property is a separate thing that we'll probably get into in some other workshop. We do not have the time. That's another Pandora's box that I don't want to open right now. But there are so many things, and all of them are derived out of your perception. And I'm not asking you to think of it in terms of policymaker or international diplomat or legislator. I'm asking you to think of it in terms of you. Water is essential for you, no one cares if it is essential for your neighbor or your uncle or whoever. It is essential for you, and so is air for you. So is land for you. Plants and living creatures, depending on what your food habits are, on varying scales, for you. So you defined environment, and you defined it in a way that it covers everything that is necessary for your sustenance, not for your uncle's sustenance, not for your pet's sustenance, not for your car's sustenance, not for your house's sustenance, for your sustenance. So one commonality that comes through this prominent factored definition of environment is that it is serving human beings. It is what our five senses have garnered and communicated to our brain that these are the things that we require for your sustenance. Now, are we only utilizing these things, or how are we utilizing these things? That is more of a metaphysical question that we do not get into right now. But The commonality that I question on this slide is you. You are common across each of these factors. It's your land that you need, your water that you need, your air, so on and so forth. But if this definition of environment is so centric to you and me and human beings and our species, then it is worthwhile to think about what is really missing from this definition. And it is something that we do not discuss. There is a lot of literature available on this. Maybe 5 years back, there was hardly any, apart from philosophers tangentially touching on environment. But what is missing, you think? And it's unless you think about what could you add to this definition, I implore all of you to think with me. Outside of these things that are fairly obvious, if you think about what else could be included in environment, which isn't, you'd be surprised with the kind of results you have. Now, to give you an example, I'll show you a news report from The Sun of the UK, the Daily. And this news report talks about how NASA and SpaceX are planning to visit this asteroid that's between Mars and Jupiter and is carrying precious metals worth 8,000 quadrillion pounds. Okay. Remember, the question I asked you was, if you were to think what is missing from the definition of environment, what would it be? If you look at this news report, you'd probably feel bad that you're not a part of NASA and SpaceX. You'd probably feel bad that you're not one of the people who gain from this exploration. But you should also think, is there a policy that governs this? We have so many mining laws on our planet. Is there a mining law that governs this? Will there be an environmental impact of this on our planet, or much worse, in the universe that we barely think about, or our galaxy that we barely think about? And just because it does not affect us as a species in a direct way, does not mean that environment, because environment, and that's one of the biggest lessons that I want all of you to take away, is all about challenging the notions that are existing. So challenge whether environment should be defined in a way that it restricts itself to human beings, or in a way where you can scope it and come to the conclusion that it's bigger than us. It has more senses perceived than we can assume, and probably different dimensions beyond the ones that we're known to perceive. So the answer to the question that I asked myself was, no mining law. If you want to get up and you have the resources and technology, go ahead and mine it, no one's stopping you. What about the impact it'll have? No one cares, because there's no policy that governs this environment. So you can do whatever you wish to. We do not appreciate this to be a part of our environment. And that's one of the basic issues. Challenge the current definitions. Now, if you think that, why should I care if environment's definition is restricted to human beings or our perceptions of it? I'll give you two examples in the form of two questions. And again, as I said, this is a bit of a monologue, so I'll be giving you the answers as well. What are the 5 most common elements in this universe? And I have a bit of a cheat code for you here. The answer, and I hope that you think about this. If you can guess, please go ahead, guess it to yourself. Let me know when we open the chat box if you got it right or not. The 5 most common elements are hydrogen, helium, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen. There are a lot of astrophysics examples and instances here, so I do apologize. Again, most common 5 elements in the universe, hydrogen, helium, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, in no specific order. Helium is an inert gas, let's leave that aside. Most common elements found in your body, in a human's body: hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen. So first of all, you need to start questioning whether you are the know-it-all, be-it-all of this universe. You are but a minuscule coincidence that happened in such a way that now you have the right to call yourself the decider of what environment should be. But the truth is, environment is a lot bigger than us. Environment has been here for a lot longer than us and will stay here in whatever form we leave it to be on this planet, but it will stay on for longer. So we're minuscule in terms of when it comes to the size of environment and the universe around us. The second question is, if this football field is the timeline of the galaxy, sorry, of the universe, where do you think human beings came into the picture? Right? Because we think that we have the right to define something that is a lot bigger than us. So let's see, when did we start making an impact? If this x-axis is the timeline of the universe, then human beings came exactly here. The thickness of a single blade of grass is how long we've been here for. And let me clarify, it's not the width of a single blade of grass, it's the thickness of a single blade of grass. So we have been here almost for the blink of an eye during the lifetime of a human being. That's how long we've been here for. And hence, we need to first gain a perspective that environment is a lot bigger than us. It's been here for the size of this football field, and it'll probably be here for a lot longer than the size of this football field. And we are, again, as I said, minuscule in terms of the impact that we wish to have. Why are we then defining everything about us? Why is environment defined as, things that affect us? Why are they only human beings or water or land or soil or plants and microorganisms? Why does it not have asteroids? And why does it not have things that are, why does it not have, dark energy or dark matter or black holes or things that we have now, I am not able to perceive at this point? The reason is that human beings have historically, if you take out a few communities, tribal communities and indigenous communities, but we have historically had an approach that is anthropocentric in nature. Now, if you're a part of the GPOTS Fellowship, we'd have an interesting discussion about these different approaches, but there's a bit of paucity of time here, so I'll restrict myself to a couple of major approaches. Anthropocentric etymologically means human-centric. So anthro means human, human-like, humanoid, centric is centric. And anthropocentric approach means that humans are at the center of it all. Everything around us is for our exploitation, oversimplified. That has been our approach throughout. And let me show you that by an example. I'm not going to get into vegetarianism arguments here. This is something that I enjoy discussing with our GPOTS fellows. And if I have to be very honest, this is, I enjoyed most of the GPOTS fellowship because it's the most discussion-based session that I give on this. But I would, at this point of time, ask you to guess to yourself, where are these photos from and which decade? These photos, without wasting any time, there are clues here. There's Pan Am Airlines, there's Science in English. So you could probably tone it down to the US because there's Pan Am. But what also helps you where in the US to answer that, and I'm giving you this trick that I've never shared ever. There are also very broad, wide roads here, right? The streets are very wide, and that means that East Coast is almost all of East Coast is out. So we left with the West Coast, and that means that we guess the most prominent cities, San Francisco or LA, and it is LA here. Which decade? If you are into fashion, you'd probably be able to guess this right away, but this is the 1960s. Why am I talking about 1960s LA when I'm discussing anthropocentrism? For that, let me take you on another bit of a journey through a story. So 1970s, especially early 1970s, is popularly known as, in some circles, as the golden age of environmental policy, environmental tech, environment, everything environmental. You know, even Woodstock, some people claim to be an environmental movement. But anyway, 1970s saw tailpipe emission standards come about, catalytic converters come about, you know, those exhausts that you have at the back of your cars, they came about in the 1970s. In the US, there were in 1967 had the Federal Clean Air Act. I'm probably not getting the exact wording, but something similar to that, a Federal Act for Clean Air, basically in 1967. And something tremendous happened in that legislation. Apart from giving standards, the federal government of the United States also allowed each state to have their own standards. So you can go above and beyond the central union federal standards that were set. And so everyone complimented these few years, and obviously 1972, the Stockholm Conference happened, which was the biggest conference then on environment. And we started appreciating the early 1970s as the golden age of environmental policy, technological interventions. You know, I have this joke that I share with the G-Pods fellows who are, you know, fans of Big Bang Theory, that there's a check engine light joke that runs through Big Bang Theory. And that came about because of this 1970s golden age, because check engine light actually has been there since 1930s, but it came into prominence because of this decade. But why did this decade have all of these wonderful technological and policy interventions? It was because, if you haven't noticed, on your screen, LA is covered in smog. Okay. The visibility is low. People are wearing these hideous masks, at least the ones that we have to wear are more fashionable. So during this decade, LA was facing one of the worst smog situations across the planet, even till today. And I know that Beijing and Delhi face their own challenges when it comes to smog, but the situation in LA was so bad that it was feared that children will be born with eczema, emphysema, asthma, skin cancer, lung diseases, bronchitis, bronchial disorders, so many other things that are related to pollution. People on a good day could not see beyond 10 meters. People on a bad day could not see beyond their bed when they woke up. And that's how bad the situation was. So we decided, as countrymen of the US, whoever they were, that this is going out of our hand and we need to do something about it. And hence came the golden age of environment. So remember, I said that check engine lights came into prominence. They came into prominence because if you had a bad engine, or if there was a fault in your engine, car engine, vehicle engine, whatever it was, it led to higher pollution. It led to more emissions, and hence a check engine light was installed so that you could check your engine and the emissions could be reduced. But it's not just that I mentioned the tailpipe, I mentioned catalytic converters, I mentioned the Federal Clean Air Act. So many, the California Air Task Board was set up. So many policy, technology, governance interventions came about because of an anthropocentric approach. Because we could not breathe anymore. Because our children were feared to have these terrible diseases. And hence, when you give credit to a certain age of our species, remember that even that credit is derived from a human-centric approach and not an environment-centric approach. And that's a perception challenge that we need to face at some point of time. The second thing, guys, give me a minute. All right. So the question then is, when and Arpit has already spoken about this, so I don't have to set up the background here. Remember, this is a story I'm telling you, and I'm happy to share your stories after this session. But let me take the story forward and come to a conclusion about this, ask you for a conclusion that you should think to yourself. If you're staying in the 70s and suddenly the government says that, listen, now you have to have tailpipes in your car, you have to have a check engine light, you have to adhere to these emission standards, you have to do this, that, so on and so forth. Would you be keen on doing this? You would think that, all right, I'm having terrible air and I should do something about this, but now I'm having to pay out of my industry will suffer, my factories will suffer, my labor will suffer. So many people will suffer because of these additional costs that the government has put on. So remember, when all of these policy technology interventions happened, someone paid a price for it. Who was the one paying the price? The people who were living through that period, right? They became the scapegoats. But the question is, should the price be paid by the people who pollute, or should the price be paid by the people who suffer? Because in this case, people who have suffered the most are paying. And obviously they have polluted, but the major chunk of pollution, similarly, smog wasn't built in a day in LA. So this pollution has accumulated over generations. In your photo on your screen now, should these people pay the price for all of those technology policy interventions? And that leads us to one of the most important principles of environmental negotiation, international relations. You saw a brief snippet of GPODs, a video compilation where Professor Christina Voigt, who drafted was one of the major drafters of the Paris Agreement, she shared with us how a lot of the discussions were basically negotiation tactics, and they were centered, if not majorly, then at least tangentially, on this wonderful principle called the common but differentiated responsibility principle, and derives itself from the fact that global north has caused pollution for a long time and global south is not able to cause pollution because we've already almost reached our limit, and by all prediction standards we're going to blast through that limit soon enough. And under this common but differentiated responsibility principle, the global north should provide financial or technological assistance to the global south. Now, I do not have the time to go into culpability and capacity. Please do join the GPODs Fellowship if you want to learn more about it. But what is happening when you're employing the CBDR, the internationally renowned principle? You're asking the global north to pay to the global south for the pollution that the global north, the developed countries, have caused over the past 350 years, depending when you think the Industrial Revolution started. Why is this problematic? Why is it wrong to ask the people who've polluted for 250 years to pay the developing world in terms of money, investments, technology, intellectual property for the wrongs that they've done? Because remember, any policy, financial, technological intervention has a cost. So when you're making the global north pay the global south today, it is the people and it is the people of today who are suffering. And is it justified for people of today, your friends and your family staying in a developed nation, is it fair to make them pay for the wrongs that their forefathers or ancestors or their nation has done in the past? And that's why this creates a moral conundrum on so many levels, at a philosophical level, but also at an environmental ethical level, environmental policy level, so on and so forth. Let me give it another 5 minutes, this topic, and then I'll move on to something that is a lot more current. why should you have an issue if your best friend staying in London has to pay you some money because her forefathers caused terrible pollution? There are two views here. One is the communitarian conservative view. The other is an axiological individualistic view. The conservative view stands on various reasonings. I have just picked up the most prominent reasonings according to me on my convenience. You're free to pick up other reasonings and you'll find a plenty. One logic is, according to Edmund Burke, who spoke about nationhood extensively, if you apply the theory of nationhood to environmental ethics, and especially beneficiary-based principle, people who have benefited from the environment, they should pay because their forefathers have exploited the environment. He said that you are born a citizen of your country and you'll die a citizen of your country. And 40 years later, 50 years later, 2 centuries later, if someone refers to you, Mr. XYZ, Miss XYZ, she died in 1870 and she was a citizen of the country that you were a citizen of. So no one can take away your nationhood even after your death. And if through that nationhood, that nation itself was built on environmental exploitation or steam engines or coal-fired power plants, then you can also not take away the benefits that that nation has provided to you. Which means that irrespective of whether you are from my generation or from earlier generations, by virtue of being a national of that nation, you will have to pay. And this appeals to a lot of people as a theory of conservative view, that friend of yours, Miss XYZ sitting in London, should pay you. Eric Newmer and Axel, I had to correct this slide, Axel Groceries, guys, not Alex Groceries. Eric Newmer and Axel Groceries have a similar, I'm going to club them only for positive time, they're absolutely different otherwise. Standard of living and free rider. These were the two things that they argued in favor of a conservative view. They said that no one should be allowed to be a free rider. Would you allow a tenant of yours to just stay there without paying rent, chill there for a couple of months? If he says, I do not have the money, you'll be like, no, that's absolutely okay. As long as you're staying there, it's okay. That would not be the case because he'd be free riding on your premises, right? And you would not allow that. Similarly, no one should free ride, according to Axel Groceries, on the benefits that have accrued to him or her due to the historical pollution caused by his or her ancestors or nation, or so on and so forth. So that's the reason why you do not allow free riders. According to Eric Newmer, those that Miss XYZ, your friend in London, has a higher standard of living than you do, even if you have exactly the same intellectual capacity, academic qualification, professional achievements, whatever you may have. She has a higher standard of living because of the historical pollution caused by her forefathers. So even on that ground, you should make her pay you. Now remember, there's an axiological individualistic view as well. Simon Caney is one of the biggest propounders of this. He's written about it extensively. He said that you must divorce the act of pollution to the polluter. Did Miss XYZ staying in London have any control over the actions of her forefathers or ancestors who did cause the pollution? And the answer is no. She could not have stopped them. They were probably, in existence 200 years before she was born. So how can you hold her accountable when she had nothing to do, no mens rea, as lawyers would like to call it, or actus reus for that matter? And hence you cannot hold her accountable. You cannot hold her liable under the beneficiary-based principle because she literally had nothing to do with that pollution. There's also this problem of population ethics, which I'm happy to discuss it. Okay, a couple of questions, answers of which I will conveniently give to you. One is, should Miss XYZ have to pay even if she did not have a part to play in the pollution? And that's dealing with the axiological view that no, she doesn't. She did not have anything to do with the pollution. Versus, yes, she should. She's not. No one is allowed to be a free rider. Why should she? If I have the same intellectual capacity, academic qualifications, professional achievements, background, resources, why does she have a higher standard of living? And hence she has to pay. And remember, this is not as disconnected to the real world as you might think, because international negotiations are still happening on the basis of historical emissions. And historical emissions is the principle that gives rise to common but differentiated responsibility, which gives rise to beneficiary-based principles. So this is quite at the heart of every conversation that's happening in international diplomacy about environment. So every conference of parties that happens every year has a major chunk of conversations on this very topic. But you might say that let them argue, how does it matter to me? Well, it matters to you because, believe it or not, you are that ancestor who is polluting for your future grandson or great-grandson or great-granddaughter. And hence, when you reverse this equation, you realize that it isn't just your forefathers who might have polluted or your forefathers who should be compensated. You are polluting too. Each of us has a humongous environmental footprint. Every email has an environmental footprint, especially if you have attachments. Every jeans, a pair of jeans, if I'm not wrong, is about 6,100 liters of water. A smartphone is a lot more. So all of us have mega environmental footprints. So you are the polluting ancestor to your great-grandchild, remember. So we need to know about this. We need to do something about this. The second question is, if you take this moral angle out of this conversation, all right, who should pay, conservative view, individualistic view, axiological, communitarian, Simon Caney, Axel Gosseries, let's take it all out. Let's take morality out of it. Let's say that global north and global south are saying that, all right, no questions, no arguments on morality. I'm right, you're right, everyone's right. Then what is stopping the global north to pay the global south to share their finance or technology or knowledge, IP, intellectual property with the global south? What is stopping the global north? Well, it's quite evident. What is stopping the global north is scarcity of resources, specifically money, right? If the global north had enough money, if it were growing on trees, if it was produced the way waste is produced around the world, then everyone would have enough of it and we could give it to the global south. So money forms, fortunately or unfortunately, one of the most important points of discussion when you're discussing environmental relations, sustainability generally. Let me quickly take you to the skyline of some of the wonderful cities of our planet. And this is when I ask you to bear with me. I promise that I need 25 minutes from now and it'll all come together. At this point, you're just going to be very confused, so just bear with me. I'm going to show you 4 photos of wonderful skyscrapers from across the globe. And I'm sure some of you can identify some. I was told recently in one of my sessions that one of them was shown in Sherlock as well. I'm sure you can guess which one I'm talking about. But that's not the one that I'm referring to here. Glass skyscrapers make for a very, very interesting case study, something that I'm currently writing about. Manhattan skyline is Manhattan. There's a hashtag called Manhattan skyline because it is all about glass skyscrapers. But there's another angle to it. Let me start by pointing this bit out. On the extreme left is this building in a city called London. And this building is called the walkie-talkie because it's in the shape of a walkie-talkie. Some people find it aesthetically pleasing as well. I'm not that some people. But the point is that this was the most expensive real estate at one point of time in the world. And it had a certain charm to it because of its location, but also because it's a skyscraper in the middle of, hardly any tall buildings, and its class. So this was coveted as one of the greatest real estates in the world. It was, as I said, one of the most expensive. But when we look at it, our perceptions, and we go back to the definition of environment, because it's what our perception allows us to perceive. When we look at this building, we think of beautiful, not so beautiful, class skyscraper, non-class skyscraper, hideous looking, whatever you might want to call it. The point is that it's a lot more than what you perceive it to be right now. Why is that? Again, I'll take you to a news report in CNN. This was a news report about the walkie-talkie. There was a Jaguar XJ parked in front of this walkie-talkie. And the reflection of the walkie-talkie, the car melted partially. And that's the kind of heat signature class skyscrapers we have. Now remember, if you have, and by the way, I find this very funny, it's a 3-line quote and it's probably cruel, but it's absolutely ruined is all the owner of the car could muster. But it is true. If you guys know about how glass buildings work, you probably also know that greenhouses are basically closed spaces, usually made out of glass or fiber or some other material that can capture the sunlight inside, and hence that provides heat for the plants to grow. That's basically a greenhouse effect. Now, when you're a scraper, you're creating humongous greenhouses. And if you're reflecting enough sunlight or heat, how much heat you're capturing. And that's one aspect of urban landscape, sustainable infrastructure that we do not cover in the mainstream, at least. And there's a lot of research going on otherwise, but something that we must consider. So you have created this skyline of greenhouse gas chambers. And what are you doing? You're trapping more heat energy inside. And no one likes sweaty co-workers. So you're air conditioning the heck out of your wonderful glass skyscraper, which is aesthetically pleasing. But when you're air conditioning the heck out of this glass skyscraper, you're putting more harmful stuff in the atmosphere, which leads to further warming, which leads to further greenhousing your glass skyscraper, which leads to higher air conditioning. And there's a vicious cycle that develops. And I have, again, a very frustrated sort of an interview about this, which was in a similar article that I picked up. I have cited the people who were talking, but the point is that this very interestingly explains the problem with glass skyscrapers. We build a glass skyscraper, it says, then you have to cool it, which uses energy, which contributes to the climate crisis, which increases temperature. The hotter the weather makes the glass building even harder to cool, but we have to keep cooling it because sweaty co-workers are not happy co-workers, and so the cycle goes on. So this is a major issue. But why am I in fact, let me come to that question a little later. Why do we have skyscrapers is the right question to ask here. And for anyone who's Yuval Noah Harari geek, nerd, you already know this, but subsistence farming, agriculture, people had time for other vocations. People had time for other vocations, employment generated, people started doing these little villages which had some sort of agriculture now became towns and then metros and so on and so forth. But remember, the landmass of those metros was the same. And hence, when the landmass is the same and the population increases, economics 101, lack of supply, more of demand, prices go up, right? Prices go up, not everyone can have bungalows anymore, so you started building atop your apartments and apartments and apartments and apartments, and hence the skyscrapers. It's quite logical. I hope some of you have thought about this. I know I hadn't till I was preparing for this lecture a few years back. But what happens when you have this valuation issue? To understand that, let me take you on a little bit of a detour of our detour that we started with. Flows, and you do not have to concern yourself with BCR. Very quickly, floor space index. Let me see if I can find something here to explain this to you. As I said, I'm going to make it very quick, but I really appreciate your attention. So say that this is 1 square meter of land, okay? This is your land. Floor space index would mean that if your floor space index is 1, then you can have built up area equivalent to your land into 1. Right? Land into 1 is you can have 1 square meter of built up area. If your floor space index of your region was 2, that means that 1 square meter of land into 2, you can have 2 square meters of built up area. And that's basically its floor space index. You can organize it in different ways. So let's take the one example. If your floor space index is 1, you can have 4 floors of 0.25, 2 floors of 0.5, 1 floor that covers the whole land. Quite simply, that's about it. But this is what makes environmental policy so interesting. You do not think of a building bylaw that governs the floor space index in your city to reflect upon environmental quality. And that is the puzzle that I'm trying to solve with all of you by giving you enough frustrating questions so that you do read up on it. Okay, so let's look at the vertical growth map of India. And I know that there are others joining us from across the globe. And this is an example across your country. I'm sure you have similar examples in your country. Let's treat this as a case study of a particular city, which I choose to be Mumbai, because I'm from Delhi and we like to take every opportunity to put Mumbai down. Okay, so let's look at the FSI of the major cities in India. Ahmedabad, which is a city in the west, is 1.2. Bengaluru is 1.75 to 3.35. Let's skip over and come to our beloved Mumbai. The island city of Mumbai has an FSI of floor space index, remember, of 1.33. Island city, not the whole of Bombay, just the island city of Bombay. What does that mean? As I explained, if your FSI is 1.33, you own, say, 10 square meters of land. That means that you can have 10 into 1.33 built up area. Okay, that means that you can have on 10 square meters of land, 13.3 square meters of built up area. Let's look at this in the context of the globe. Major cities of India, major cities of the world, Mumbai, by every standard, is competitive to be put in the same list as Hong Kong or Chicago or New York or Singapore, right? So let's look at the FSIs. Guys, let me also preface this by saying that there's a reason why Mumbai's FSI is so low, and that's the topic for another discussion. Join the G-Pod Fellowship if you want to know more about this. Mumbai's FSI is 1.3. Chennai is 1.3, Jaipur, Kolkata, Delhi, Nagpur. These are the other major cities of India. Let's look at cities at par with Bombay globally. Hong Kong is 12, 10 times Mumbai. Chicago is around 12, 13. 10 times Mumbai. New York is 15, 15 times Mumbai almost. Singapore is so much that does not fit on my slide. Okay, it's around 24. So Mumbai is 1.33 as compared to New York, which is 15, as compared to Singapore, which is around 20. Now I'm going to throw a few numbers at you. And I will take the liberty of unmuting 3 GPOTS fellows, or whom I see on my screen. And I want them to guess what these numbers are. And if you know what I'm asking, please do not answer. Just tell me that you know what the answer is. Okay. You know who you are. I've asked you to unmute yourself. The question is, what is 48 square feet and what is 50 square feet? Any guesses? We're talking about floor space index. We're talking about Mumbai.
I know the answer, but I'll keep quiet.
Okay, PK. All right, let's stop there. Titli, do you know the answer too?
Possibly.
Okay, all right. So let's leave it there. But I hope that that has given you guys, the rest of you, some time to think about what I'm asking. What is 48 square feet? What is 50 square feet? In the context of Mumbai, in the context of floor space. And this is amusing, guys. Give this some time to, give yourself some time to absorb this. 48 square feet. Pregnant pause. 48 square feet is the average floor space per person in Mumbai, in the island part of Mumbai. That's 7 feet by 7 feet. That's the average floor space available per person in the island part of Mumbai. 50 square feet is the average floor space of a prison cell in the US. And that's what you're talking about. That is how much of a space constraint there is in Mumbai because of the 1.3 FSI, something that you do not think of when you're talking about environment. What happens when you have a space constraint? We referred to Yuval Noah Harari earlier. What happens is that your rents go up, slums increase because now you cannot afford the land, so you congregate in slums, but not everyone wants to stay in a slum, so you go to a suburb. And if there isn't a suburb, you establish a suburb, right? What happens if you have a suburb? Now you need to commute to the island city of Mumbai, right? So you require transportation. What happens when you have slums, suburban sprawl, and transportation? You have environmental impacts, impacts that you do not account in terms of a byproduct of a policy that you did not think to be environmental in the first place. And that's the whole lesson that we need to take from this session. That environment, sustainability is not a product of environment plus environment equals 2x. Environment is a product of everything that happens around you. Sustainability is certainly a study of everything that happens around you. I have a lecture at GPOTS, which I recently delivered, where we cover the definition of sustainable development and what population should be and what development should be and what sustainability should be. There's a lot more to uncover within this domain of environmental law, policy, sustainability than we do perceive. Let's take this conversation forward, because remember, I'm talking about why is this so difficult, and why is everyone tripping about climate change solutions? Why can't anyone just come up with a solution, right? As I mentioned, money is a very big issue. And for money to be established, you need cost. And for natural resources, you ideally need value, right? Not just the cost. So the price of water you pay is the cost of the water. It's not the value of the water. That's the difference, remember. You're not paying for the value of the water. You're paying for the cost of the water. Let's say that, and I usually spend some time, but I'm running out of time, so I won't. I usually spend some time going over the valuation challenges of slums, of suburban sprawl, of transportation. But I'm going to take a step forward here and tell you that, all right, I say that Dharavi has an environmental impact through various audits, ESG, so on and so forth, has a valuation of X billion, okay, in terms of its environmental impacts. And Matheran or Thane have an environmental impact of Y billion dollars. And transportation to and fro from the main city has an environmental impact of Z million dollars. You can still put a price on these things by an imperfect analysis, and I argue for good reason that it's an imperfect analysis. Cost-benefit analysis when you're considering ecosystem services cannot be perfect. But anyway, you come up with the dollar figure, and that's relatively easy as compared to what I'm going to discuss next. What about the unliquidated damages? What about the intangible damages caused to the environment by policies that you do not think to be environmental in the first place? What about the damages that have been caused to the environment by your low FSI in your neighborhood? That's something, I mean, I'd be surprised if any of us know what the FSI of our area is. Something as irrelevant is dictating our pollution. That's one of the factors, obviously. That does not define a pollution, but it's one of the major factors. One of the factors, at least. But let me take you through two case studies as to why money or valuation of environmental resources is so difficult and why we're still struggling to come up with a direct answer to the climate crisis that we're in. The first study is a study of chess players. The study was called The Impact of Indoor Climate on Human Cognition, Evidence from Chess Tournaments, a working paper. And what was basically done is chess players across tournaments were monitored, and their cognitive performance, their game performance was monitored as a function of the pollution, right? It was seen that a 10 microgram per cubic meter increase in PM 2.5 levels led to a 10% chance of larger errors. 10 micrograms per cubic meter, PM 2.5, 10% larger errors. Okay. Now, you may say that you're not a chess player. You find it extremely boring. You're more of an outdoor person. That's fair enough. Probably I would side with you as well. But that's not the point of this case study. The point is that what is the most prominent feature of a chess game or player? Focus, right? You're extremely focused when you're playing chess. Cognitively engaged. You're using your brain when you're playing chess. And time sensitive, at least when you're playing chess at a certain level, you have to hit the clock after every move, right? So focus, cognitive engagement, time sensitive. But let's get back to your argument. You're not an indoor person. You do not care about chess. It's a game for nerds. Fine. Let's give you another example. You are a baseball aficionado, and you come across the study where you see that a similar study was done for outdoor pollution. The name of the study was Air Quality and Air Quantity, Pollution Performance in a High-Skilled, Quality-Focused Occupation. Let's quickly jump to the results. I'm conscious of the time. 1 parts per million increase in a 3-hour carbon monoxide window causes an 11.5% increase in the propensity of baseball umpires to make incorrect calls. 1 parts per million increase, guys. I'm not talking of, 10 whatever. I don't even know the right way to put this. A kilogram. This is a lot lesser. 1 carbon monoxide window causes an 11.5 increase in your propensity, if you're a baseball umpire, to make incorrect calls. So what is happening? Your FSI is low. You are playing a game outside. No one wants you in his or her side, so they make you the baseball umpire. And you keep giving incorrect calls, and people start blaming you that you're just pissed with us because we're not making you play. That's not the case. It is happening because the FSI in your region could be low. It could be happening for various other factors. But the point is that now your decision-making ability is getting affected. But it's absolutely okay if you're not an outdoor person either and you do not care for baseball. Let us take the meat out of this question. What are the three most important features, at least some of the most important, three more important features of a baseball umpire? Focus, cognitive engagement, time sensitivity, right? So that's the same as a chess player. One is an indoor case, one is an outdoor case. And their error percentage drastically increases by a minuscule level of pollution, increase in pollution. And this could be related to an environmental policy, but more importantly, it could be related to something absolutely tangentially unrelated to environment for our perception's sake. And that is why challenging perceptions right at the definition of environment is so important. Okay. You might still tell me that you umpires or chess, and that's also okay. You can be stubborn if you like, but it will affect you. Because let's take other professions which have focus, cognitive engagement, and time sensitivity. How about you need a surgery and there's a surgeon and you stay in a polluted city? What are the three attributes that you want in your surgeon apart from skill? You want focus, you want cognitive engagement, you want time sensitivity, right? Error percentage, 11.5%. What if you're investing in a stock? It's a high pressure job. You've called your stockbroker. What do you want that stockbroker to do apart from skill? You want focus, you want time sensitivity, you want cognitive engagement. Air traffic controller, miners. I do not, because I deliver the session a lot in schools, I do not put that example, but because this is an open session, imagine a student sitting in a classroom thinking that he had or she had covered everything in the syllabus and blanking out or making errors in her exam and thinking that, I have this wonderful, awful habit of forgetting things at the wrong time. That's not the case. It could be a function of the pollution in your city. And we just haven't put a finger on it. Now, the challenge here is not bringing these things to you and explaining to you that these are the relative disadvantages of having a policy that does not have an environmental mapping system that can consider the environmental impact that policy that seems to be unrelated to environment does end up having. The problem is valuation. You can still put a dollar figure to that slum and its environmental impact, to that suburb and its environmental impact, to that transportational system and its environmental impact. How do you put a dollar figure to the loss of a life caused by a surgeon who would not have made a mistake had the government or the private sector not lobbied against having an FSI that is higher, or having a master plan of your city that did not have an FSI that was so low? What if this does happen and the surgeon does make an error and the patient sues the doctor for medical negligence? Who pays? Does the doctor pay, the surgeon pay, or does that surgeon blame the government for having a policy that increases the air pollution that makes the surgeon make these errors or have a high percentage of errors? So these are some of the questions that I'm going to leave you with. If you join the GPOTS Fellowship, we'll also be discussing the solutions, I assure you. I hope you had fun. Please do reach out to us if you have any questions. I'll also be available for about 5 minutes to take up any questions that you might have. I request Srishti to please unmute, to please open the chat box, and I'm happy to take up any questions that we might have. Also, please feel free to raise your hands if you can. If you have any questions, I can also unmute. can we open? Yeah. Can we open the chat box, please? Yeah. All right. Any questions, any statements? I'm going to type in my email ID as always, and you please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm also putting the website link to the GPod's website. You can also check out the website or write to us at this email ID. And yeah, it was a pleasure to speaking with all of you. Deepsha, that's a PhD thesis altogether. I'll be happy to discuss this, but that's a very broad topic. I do not know if you're specifically referring to the EIA draft notification, because I have public lectures available on that on YouTube, or you can directly contact me and I'm happy to discuss that separately as well. And please do write to me. I'm happy to engage with all of you. You can also add me on LinkedIn, and it's always a pleasure to connect with people on LinkedIn as well. Abhishek, that's a, all right. No, it is not going in the right direction. I have also written about this in, I think, the Indian Express recently. No, sorry, the Statesman, if I'm not wrong, and you can read about this. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you for all the wonderful statements. And we will keep you in the loop about our future events. We have a lot of events scheduled over the next 1 month, 1.5 months. At some point, I'm going to get really tired of these events and take a break. But till then, I assure you that I'll keep you engaged and I'll keep you in the loop about everything that we're doing. And thank you so much for joining us. To all the GPods fellows, we have a happy hour in half an hour. I hope you're looking forward to it, because I really am. I need it. I hope you do too. All right. Thank you so much, guys. See you soon. Please do keep us in the loop about everything that's happening in your life, and do reach out to us in the email IDs provided. See you guys.